Thinking of you, thinking of you. Thinking of you, thinking of you. Thinking of you.
And I know that it's
So should we do introductions? Who'd like to go first?
Not me.
You go. You go. Jade, you go.
Okay, well, I'm Jade and I'm a mum and I live in Yorkshire. And I always say that my awakening started in about 2008, but in truth, I think it actually started around the Twin Towers 9/11. And I think that really kind of shook something loose in my mind. And since after that, I was never quite the same. And then in about 2008, I really started to look at things very differently. And I started to become a bit obsessive with my research and, you know, started to be labeled a conspiracy theorist, of course. But then about 6 years later, in 2015, I had a very spontaneous chakra activation and Kundalini awakening. And I would say that that's where things got really wild. And since then it's been a really incredible journey, and it's led me to want to kind of do things like this, you know, where I want to speak out and I want to try and help people, because I think we're going through a real transition. Humanity's at a crossroads. We're transitioning into something new and hopefully very wonderful, and I think we're going to finally really discover some things about ourselves and our real nature. So I'm just very excited about that. And so yeah, Nia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Nia. I'm on the coast in Devon. It's beautiful here. I love it. I'm not from Devon. We moved here a couple of years ago. Anyway, when I was thinking about how to introduce myself, who am I asked myself often that question. And quite often I reinvent myself confidently at this point in time, because that's what life is all about for me, growing and changing. So who am I today? Today I'm a global citizen in my own view, a lover of life, a lover, a friend, a mother of two, most of the time wonderful children. And Jade talked about awakening. I'm not sure when my journey started. I suppose it was gradual with different things and occasionally drifting back off to sleep. But on and off, I might say all my life, really. It's been an incredible journey in the last 8 years or so, and especially in the last 3 months, I think I've had a quantum leap of where I was to who I am now today, and that's very, very exciting. And I'm really looking forward to share some really simple, interesting, and in my view quite easy things to do with, you know, for everybody.
Well, I love your introductions. So now I'm a little bit like, what the hell am I supposed to say? So I'm Sarah. What can I say about myself? I'm a wife. I'm a mother to my daughter's 6 months old. So that's all very new to me. Something that is I'm already out of my comfort zone with that. So being out of our comfort zones with this and everything that's going on in the world right now, it's like juggling, you know, as you guys probably know, juggling so much at the moment. So it's interesting. It's I always think that, you know, I'm a firm believer in everything that happens for a reason. Everything does. I do believe that. And, you know, life is an adventure more than anything. So I've tried my hand at so many different things. I've been quite somewhat of a risk taker, some people would say. So I was made redundant twice in 6 weeks back in 2016, decided to start my own business and have been toying with different things ever since. So that's been an adventure. So yeah, now with motherhood and, you know, doing the things that I'm doing on the side, virtual assistance work and teaching people about how to create their business online, things like that. And being a mother, did I already say that? is really interesting. It's really interesting. And it's fun. It is fun. It's hard work, but it's, you know, my daughter, I heard somebody say this to me once, and it couldn't be more true, that my daughter is like my biggest teacher. So I'd say, you know, it is so true, right? So I've been through, in terms of like awakening with this kind of thing, I've been through, like Nia was saying, ups and downs. I've like, you know, kind of woken up and then gone back to sleep and then thought, this looks a bit fishy, and then sort of thought nothing of it again. I haven't really questioned it too much. I've always thought, you know, I don't really trust what's really going on, but I've thought, well, it doesn't I was one of those people that thought, you know, it doesn't affect me, so why would I really bother questioning it too much? And me and my sister, my twin sister, we would like talk about these things, and we'd be like, oh my God, isn't it like really crazy that this is happening? Could it all be, especially with the Twin Towers, could it all be like made up? Could it all be something that they have orchestrated themselves? And we'd talk about it for a little while, and then we'd just carry on with our lives. So I think this has really hit home for a lot of people as well. Everything that's going on now, it's like all of a sudden people can't ignore it. So it's being thrust in our faces, I think, for a reason. I think, you know, like I said, everything happens for a reason. So yeah, I think now, especially maybe since 2016, starting my business, that really woke me up to a lot of things, because I had to learn so much on that journey as well. And that takes you completely outside of your comfort zone. So then all of a sudden, you know, you're opening your eyes to new things and learning new things. And it just, I don't know if the term is like widens your perception. Yeah, that's probably a good way, I think, of explaining it, the best I can think of anyway. But yeah, it's been an interesting one.
Oh yeah, that was an amazing introduction. And honestly, what you said about, I think some of us, like, we've really been on this journey for a while where maybe our whole lives things have just not quite felt right.
Yeah.
And in some cases, I know I went through a big phase at one point where I was really trying to get people to see what I was seeing, and it was like this urgency of something's going to happen, open your eyes. And like you said, all of a sudden it's been thrust upon everybody, and everybody's just scrambling for some kind of understanding, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And especially to then be heard, and for people to understand, and to kind of have this like form of validation almost. Do you know what I mean? Because when you can suddenly see something that you've never seen before, and you try and explain it to somebody else, like, I have just noticed this, then you get all of the people saying you're a conspiracy theorist, you know, like you were saying, Jade, and it's just, it feels so frustrating, because there's so much stuff that you can finally see and nobody else can still see it yet. So I think we're going to talk about that, aren't we, in a bit? But just having that, I can imagine there's a lot of people probably going through that right now as well.
Oh yeah, I love the conspiracy theorist one.
Nia, you just stride through life just with that inner knowing, don't you? You're like the Buddha.
My kids think I'm a conspiracy theorist as well, but that's okay.
Yeah, my family are just rolling their eyes at me at the moment. They're just like, oh, she's at it again. Like, I was known as the hippie before. I don't know about you guys, but I was known as the hippie, or you know, the spiritual one, and all of this lot, because I've always been into like energies and frequencies and grounding and things like that, meditation and yoga, and been kind of like the black sheep, so some people would say, in my family with that kind of thing. So they've always been like, oh, she's a bit weird, you know, in terms of that. But now they're just like, whoa, Sarah's gone off the deep end.
Not so much black sheep, but the weird one, definitely.
You know what was funny though? So for years I would kind of get called a kook, and people would be like, oh, you know, you're just a bit of a kook and a conspiracy theorist. And then last year, when everything started coming to a head, all of a sudden my inbox was full with all of these people that have said, oh, Jade, you're a kook, you're a conspiracy theorist, saying, what do you think's happening? I was like, hang on a minute, you want to know my opinion?
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to happen more and more, isn't it? But for everybody that's kind of waking up, I suppose there's always somebody that's one step ahead of us or that is more experienced than us in terms of like what they know about things. So like, you know, I'm turning to people that I've been looking at or just kind of briefly looked at before. And now I'm like, whoa, actually, especially people that you've introduced me to, Jade, like Barbara, listening to her. And now I'm like, I'm obsessed. Because I'm like, she knows so much, I need to know more.
I know,
So
mind-blowing stuff,
feels
isn't
like
it?
it's like this domino effect, isn't it? Like people are coming to you and then, you know, you're looking to others and everybody just needs to know what the hell is going on.
That's really funny actually that you brought that up, because I was just thinking the other day, you know, I really have a lot of sympathy for people that are having to wake up in the middle of all of this, because that must be hard. And, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was hard too, because you felt very alone in it all and there was nobody you could talk to. But then I think, oh gosh, think about the people who've been on this path for 30 years or even 50 years.
Yeah.
So there's always somebody else to kind of look up to, isn't there? Which is nice because it means you can find a teacher at every point.
Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting you ladies said that, because in the last few months, well, I'd like to say that the 2020 was probably the most challenging year for most people altogether, and it was challenging for us and the family and for myself on every conceivable level, that's a very big statement, but it's true. There was an area of my life didn't get shaken up, and to start with, I thought, oh, it's okay, it's just gonna blow over, it's no big deal. There's like all kinds of crazy talk all the time. It's no big deal, we'll be fine. And then a few months later, 2-3 months later, I was in one of the biggest dips in my life ever, with the crisis, with the children, with business, with relationship, with the world, you name it. It was extremely hard. And I suppose mental health is a huge thing, because I consider myself a very seasoned and a really grounded person, that it's got really good skills at managing my own state and my own life. And I have a very good track record of like highs and lows, and always been able to put myself in the right space. But this year took me in a place that I'd never expected to be, and it was extremely challenging. And actually, extremely challenging doesn't cover it at all. It was bigger than that. It was deeper than that. It was worse than that. And in the few months, I had to either, well, I asked myself the question: did I have enough of this life? Is this too hard to carry on? Because the journey became very, very painful, which I suppose a lot of people can relate to. A lot of people can relate to that. And or is there still I can do something to pull myself together, or to ground myself and maybe just do one step at a time? So what I personally did was go in, just completely go in, shut the world, and went through my most dramatic transformation, actually. And through that transformation, in the last 2-3 months, I started bearing the fruits of the change and the journey. And at this point, my world has become really quite peaceful and quiet. At this point in time, I feel no need to look out, to I'm not looking for a teacher, like we said before. I feel no need to listen to anything or anyone. I am very interested in sharing, as in sharing, receiving and giving, receiving and giving. But at this point, I'm the guiding light of my life.
Mm.
So that's never happened to me before. So it's really quite new and quite interesting. And every now and again, of course, as a human being, all kinds of feelings come, and I doubt myself at times, and
Yeah.
the lot that comes with being a human. But it's become very quiet and very calm in my little world. And I
Mm.
am getting better and better. I can't say I'm really good, but I'm getting better and better at taking everything around me with a huge dose of discernment. I'm able to observe, and I'm getting better at steadying myself in my own ship, navigating through the storms at the moment. And I think this is the biggest gift I've received in recent months in my life. And this is something I would love to talk about more and
Mm.
share, to kind of
Yeah.
I don't know, not that a lot of people don't know that's possible, but from a personal
Mm.
experience, from my humble little life, I am actually living it at the moment. This is the space where I'm
Mhm.
at, and it's incredibly. I'm going to use the word powerful. It's incredibly
Mhm.
to be able to steady yourself within the light of you, and be the observing eye, but I lost my train of thought. Be the observing eye, but remain calm and steady, and be able to transmit out instead of constantly
Mm.
receive. If that makes sense. I don't know if I'm able to communicate it clearly.
It absolutely does. And actually, I feel like you're incredibly brave for sharing, you know, how it kind of did send you into this very difficult and almost traumatic state. And I always say that sometimes when there's enough trauma externally, that does shake people awake. And I think that's kind of what we're dealing with on a mass scale right now. There's so much more that I want to say about that. Well, I just wanted to kind of respond quickly to what Nia was just saying. So she was sort of talking about how she went into a bit of a dark time when all of this coronavirus stuff kind of kicked off.
Yeah.
And I relate to that completely. And for me, I mean, it was a little bit different for me because I'd gone through a lot of trauma and a lot of difficulty when I was a lot younger, and I was very much kind of ruled by my external circumstances, and I hadn't really mastered that projecting what's on the inside into my external world. And then in the last few years, I really felt like I'd kind of got to that point where I was very confident in my spiritual self, and I felt like I'd done a lot of healing and a lot of clearing. And then I was in almost a blissful point in my life where I was extremely happy, and probably the happiest I'd ever been, and just very kind of, you know, healed and very whole. And I was kind of developing my spiritual gifts as well, and it was amazing. And then when all of this began in March last year, it sent me into kind of a similar thing where all of a sudden I felt like I lost that a little bit. And I think a big part of it for me was, as a mother, you know, worrying about my children, and it really knocked me off my center. And even my partner really noticed, and he said, you know, I'm worried about how much this has kind of suddenly changed you. And I really had to work hard to get back to that kind of center and to start kind of projecting my reality again. But it was extremely difficult. So I went through a very similar thing, but I think I kind of came from a different sort of place in a way. But I feel like I'm very much back there now, you know, and I'm really kind of, I think I had to go through that for a reason to bring me to this next point. And I think that's one of the things about our spiritual journey is we'll sort of be tested, and we get to see if we graduate at each point. And sometimes when you kind of been on this journey for a while, the things that are thrown at you and the lessons and in the inner stuff, because that's what I was dealing with. It wasn't that I was particularly scared of what they were saying on the news or how the people around me were responding. I think for me, I was going through something where it was like, you know, I've been kind of feeling isolated almost from society for a long time because of my beliefs. And I think I'd almost convinced myself that I was living in this utopia where nothing bad was ever going to happen again. And then all of a sudden we were thrust into this, and there was this inner, this kind of awakening of, oh my God, I was actually right. And I think that's what sent me spiraling into darkness. It wasn't so much what was happening externally, it was what I was dealing with internally. So I relate to that maybe in a different way, but I think, you know, you're very brave, Nia, to bring that up, and how hard it's been for people, not just, you know, who are kind of maybe starting to realize that something's not quite right, but for people who've been on this journey for a while and maybe thought that they kind of had it mastered a little bit, and then it's even sent us, it's kind of knocked us off that podium, and you know, that's been quite hard to deal with. And I think we've had to kind of try and scramble back to do more work and clearing that maybe we didn't even know that we had to do.
To be honest,
100%.
I felt, oh, sorry, Sarah.
No, go on.
I was going to say that I had to really eat humble pie, because before that I was of the I thought I really had it sussed. I had really created a world that I really enjoy, and
Same, yeah.
a level of mastery of myself. I had a ton of stuff, and life was flowing really well. So I really got knocked, you know, face down to the ground, and it was very, very hard for me to swallow the pill. It was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do.
Absolutely.
Same. And I like, it's maybe similar to Jade's experiences. I felt like I had a difficult time when I was in my early 20s. There was a few years where I wasn't very well physically. I wasn't well, and I had a big battle with that mentally, trying to come to terms with what was going on with me physically. And I already felt like I was kind of segregated from the world then, from trying to bring myself through all of that. And I felt like I learned so much, and I felt like, you know, after I'd come through that and learned so much about myself and kind of learned how to create my reality from the inside out kind of thing, I felt like I was sorted. and then this happened. So I was saying, I think I mentioned to you, Jade, before about you know, being seen as the strong one in my family, or the one who nothing really seems to faze her, or she's always just so, like, you know, annoyingly positive and all of that stuff. So which I was fine with. I didn't have a problem with it. But then I realized then how much this hit me. I was like, you know, it shocked me, and it did make me kind of sit back and think. I guess it kind of humbled me, because I was like, holy whatever, I'm not dealing with this as well as I should be dealing with it. And I think there's so many sort of, like, you know, we feel like we've got to get our grip on it, or we feel like we've got to have our shit together, for want of a better word, and it just doesn't always end up like that. So we kind of have to give ourselves some grace, I think, and a little bit of I don't know what another word is for it, but forgiveness, I guess, for us being a bit shaky when all of this started, because it's not something that we come across every day. And like we were saying, it feels like we're so used to things being just rosy, and we're just able to carry on and live the rest of our lives in this, our form of our utopia. But I mean, we needed to see this to know what was going on and to be able to learn from it. And it's just like peeling the layers of the onion off, isn't it? Because it is. Just you've learned everything you need to learn, something else comes along, and this is a big one.
I think that's a really important point, because I think a lot of people who maybe haven't been asleep, they're sort of, you know, well, I knew something big was coming, so especially last year, it's sort of, why wasn't I coping better with it? But we've been knocked sideways, and I think you're absolutely right. We all need to just have a bit of patience and understanding, not just towards ourselves, but towards others as well. You know, because I went through a phase a few months ago where I was getting really angry with the sheeples, you know, for want of a better word, and I was getting annoyed. We went into a shop one day, and we were just trying to buy a birthday card, and you know, this man laid into us about the fact that we weren't wearing face masks, and it really took all of my strength not to get angry and really kind of educate that guy right there and then, you know. But I've sort of realized that even we're feeling knocked sideways. So can you imagine how frightened other people who maybe had no prior context to what's going on must be feeling? And so I try and bring myself back to that compassionate point, because I realize that even people who are kind of where we're at are struggling. So it must be really hard for others. And so I think that is a really important thing to touch on.
Yeah, definitely. And there was a few members of my family that had said about, you know, we're kind of starting to see where you're coming from, or you know, they're saying, you know, we know that the media don't tell us the truth, or we know that the media aren't really truthful in everything. And then right there, I want to hand them all of the evidence again and say, right, now that I can see a crack, let me get in there and give you everything I've got to, like, open your eyes wide open. But I have to give everything, like, you know, hold myself back so much, because I was getting really angry, you know, with my family saying, you know, and my friends and stuff, and especially holding back on social media, because I'm usually quite outspoken with things that I say. I have had to pull back and, you know, understand that it's just not that simple to go out and give everything that you know to everybody and expect them to soak it all in. This has to be kind of drip fed to us almost, because it's just so much of an upside down happening.
And that is an advantage that we've had, in a way, sort of awakening earlier, is we have had that chance to kind of drip feed the information to ourselves and research. I know a lot of us just go hardcore and we're absolutely obsessed with researching the way things really are, and but at least we kind of could do that at our own leisure, whereas right now it's so urgent that I think a lot of people are trying to force things onto their family and their friends, and they're trying to crack them open very quickly, and not everybody can go at that pace.
Yeah, a lot of lessons to be learned there. Sorry, Nia.
No, that's okay. I was going to go back to what both of you actually were saying about the anger was a huge thing for me, because I was angry. I had a very, very angry few weeks where I just couldn't contain the anger. It was towards the sheeple, it was towards what was happening, it was towards what I was faced with. You know, people I considered close friends were blocking me or private messaging, abusing me. And of course, my family was torn as well, because people didn't know in my family what to make of it. And just anger overtook over my life in so many ways. And I was so angry for such a long time. It just became the norm. I was just getting angry about everything. So
I went through exactly the same thing, and that must have been a shock to you, right, Nia? Because then you were like, you know, this isn't me. I'm not angry. I'm losing my mind.
Yeah. I know how to handle myself. I've learned how to manage myself. It's not who I am, and yet it was just. And the more I was trying to rein it in, the more reasons I had to be angry. I was getting so many reasons to be angry. I suppose at one point I just decided, well, it's a collective, so I'm just absorbing it. But that it didn't shift.
Yeah.
I took responsibility and acknowledged the fact that yes, it is the collective. Everybody's got a ton of reasons to be angry, but at the end of the day, it's my responsibility to see what is it that it's so much for me. Why is it so overwhelming? What is it? And how can I take it one little step at a time to own my anger, to integrate it instead of trying to get rid of it. And
you can't deny the shadow work, can we?
Yeah, that's another term for it, shadow work. And that was a huge new level for what I now call not a shadow work. I now call it a radical integration of all parts.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Yes.
That was me.
Radical integration. I'm stealing that.
Yeah, because it wasn't about the shadow anymore. I just didn't want to consider any parts of myself to be dark. I didn't want to judge them in that duality anymore because it wasn't serving me. So I
Yeah.
decided to radically love all of these parts, and that's not the first integration work I've done. I've done integration work 8 years ago with the Julia Cameron live workshop in London, and that was incredible. But what happened this year, without anybody around me, just tuning into myself and deciding to do another round of owning myself. Now that was radical and it was hard, but it brought so much peace and
I
power.
think that is probably even more powerful, the fact that during these times we haven't really been able to have that same support system that we would normally have, you know.
Yeah.
So where we would usually go and express our emotions with friends or with family, or even with like social clubs, or you know, whatever it is that you've got going on, yoga class, anything like that, we don't have that now. As well as the feeling that when you are awakening and you are going through all of this stuff, that you already feel lonely because all of a sudden it feels like you're the only one going through it.
Yeah.
Now we really do kind of feel like we are on our own, because we're not allowed to go out and do things like we normally would. So, but it's incredibly powerful or empowering to then come through the other side of that. And if anybody is feeling like they're in that phase of anger at the moment, or they do feel like they're shattering into a million pieces, like it doesn't last. That's one of the things that we you know, have experienced ourselves, is that it might feel like there's not going to be the light at the end of the tunnel, but there is, in terms of personal growth and how you can then be your own support system. And it's so empowering then to be on the other side of that and think, wait, you know, I got through it again, and this is, you know, another notch on the strength wall, if you like. I'm so good, so terrible with my I don't even know what they're called, but you know, my example.
Sarah, I totally agree with when you're saying there that we had no support. I don't think anybody had any support. Even people that are perceived as teachers or gurus, this was a unique experience to all of us, to every single one. So we had no support, and all we had was ourselves, and we had nowhere to go but within.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that makes, usually when you're looking outside of yourself, even when you're doing this internal work and you're looking inwards, you can kind of have a break from it and get back to reality, if you like, and you know, look in a different direction for a while. But this is really focusing everyone inwards, like 24 hours a day. It feels like there's no let up at all. So it's like intense integration work that is just.
I described it in my other video as a collective dark night of the soul. And there was, I think part of my anger was, hey, you know, I've dealt with so much of my shadow work and I've come so far, and now I'm having to deal with the collective shadow, really? But I'm realizing that the awakening that we go through spiritually is now being mirrored by the collective. And so really, you know, I feel very fortunate that I've had a little bit of forewarning and a little bit of, maybe I was a little bit forearmed, because once I'd kind of got over the shock, it was like, hang on a minute, this is sort of familiar. Even though I'm not the one going through it personally now, I recognize this from what I went through back then. And now I can see that everybody's kind of in this dark night of the soul. So absolutely agree.
Yeah, I do think so. I think everybody's going through it at the same time, which is incredible. I'm not sure if you know, you're like aware of the, well, obviously you are aware of the like ascension timelines, and I think the 2021 is this the age of Aquarius? Jade, you know more about that.
From an astrological point of view, I made a video about this because I was quite excited about it. So from the astrological point of view, we had the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in December, and it was actually at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in itself isn't that special. It happens every 19 years. But this one, for the first time in sort of hundreds of years, was moving from earth signs into air signs, and it was starting at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So for me personally, I try not to attach too much meaning to any date or any prediction or anything like that. But for it to be bang smack at 0 degrees of Aquarius, and then for it to influence the next 200 years and the next 800 years, and for this to be a new cycle that was beginning. For me, it was probably the single greatest signal that I'd ever seen in astrology of, you know, the age of Aquarius. So yeah, and you know, it also, from what I understand, ties in with the ending of the Kali Yuga cycle, which is a type of dark age. But obviously with cycles like this, because they encapsulate such a large time period, the transition, you're not just going to go from dark to light. You know, you're not just going to wake up one morning and it's going to be a golden age. It's going to be a transition, and people have to catch up, and the collective consciousness has to catch up with that. Yeah, I think we have some incredible energies at play now for us to really create something collectively that's really beneficial and wonderful, and most of all, that's not deceptive, and that's not just serving the most tiny little boardroom of people on this planet, but maybe can serve everybody. And that's something that I get really excited about personally.
Yeah.
So I mean, I hope that's where we're going. I think we do try to figure things out and work things out, and we might be wrong, but there's something about all of this to me, because, you know, when I was awakening, I kept thinking, how can this change? And I think I had this like idea in my mind that people would just get up to speed and we would be able to live in this collective, conscious, loving, unified kind of reality. And I'm now seeing that it's not like that. It's never going to be like that. And awakening personally isn't like that. You have to go through all of the muck, and you have to dig all of that shadow stuff out, and you have to face your traumas, and you have to face your dark side. And like Nia said, you have to integrate, or you have to be able to work through and release that stuff. And now we've got to give everybody a chance to kind of go through that. And I think we have an opportunity here. And one of the things that I'll say is that we're looking at society now, and it's very frightening, because a lot of people are trying to cling on to the way that things used to be. And it's going to become a case of let go or be dragged, because there is no way that you can hang on to. Everything is collapsing. It's all dying. It's all collapsing. And there might be people on this planet that have already made their minds up about what that's going to be replaced with. But I think what's happened is it's inadvertently set off a chain reaction and an awakening. And this is an opportunity now for us to actually really give some thought to what we want our reality to be. And I do think there is a kind of, there's another angle of this as well, and that's the spiritual side. And, you know, many people, I talk quite a lot about the Kundalini awakening. Many people are suddenly being activated with this awakening. And, you know, hundreds of years ago, or even 10, 20 years ago, this was something that was reserved for gurus. You know, they used to go into the caves for most of their lives and meditate in solitude, just to activate this energy within themselves, which is within everybody. And sometimes they would activate it and they would die before they went through the full process, you know. So this was something that was sought after. It was something that people strived or devoted their entire lives to, and now people are just being randomly activated. So I actually believe that we are going through the next stage of human evolution. And I think one of the big decisions that we have in front of us now is it going to be our birthright of an evolution, which is maybe our DNA upgrade, it's our abilities kind of being switched back on again, our forgotten abilities, or is it going to be somebody else's vision? You know, are we going to go towards being more spiritual or more cyborg? Are we going to go towards being more divided or more unified? And these are the things that, you know, a lot of people are just kind of blindly walking along, not realizing that we're at this massive crossroads. And I think this is a time where we really need to have our eyes open and be very conscious about where we're going.
I do see that there is a unification, though, of a lot of people. I don't know if you guys feel the same. That I think what this, you know, this situation that we're in currently in the world, in all the different subjects that are going on at the moment, whatever it is, you can see that the most important thing, or one of the biggest things that I feel is happening, is that everybody is now on a level playing field. There aren't people on pedestals, or, you know, the celebrities are in the same boat as we are, the doctors, the nurses are in the same boat as we are, the politicians are in the same boat as we are. You know, everybody is going through this together almost, or maybe not so much the politicians, but, you know, us. The people
are even now seeing through the politicians, aren't they? And it's kind of this, well, they're just as flawed as everybody else, and you know.
Yeah, and we're all kind of moving forward in the same direction. Like whether we still have differing opinions, we're kind of like being nudged in the same direction. But it's all of us, every single one of us together, and that's what I find is so interesting. I do think that there is going to be more of a united front in what are we going to put up with, what are we going to allow to slip through the cracks. Like eventually we are, you know, like you were saying, going to be at this crossroads about which direction we go in. And I do have faith that we are going in the right direction together, even if some people are, you know, like you said, being dragged through it. They will eventually, we can push against the tide or we can ride the wave. Do you know what I mean? We can always be pushing against it and thinking that, you know, we don't want things to change or we want things to go back to how they were and, you know, back to normal. But what about if there's a better way, there's a better normal, or there's a new normal? And I don't like that phrase at the moment, but there's a new normal that we choose, that we decide is the right thing for us.
I really would like to touch upon what you both just talked about separation. But what I'd like to draw your attention is to, if you think about over the last millennia, there were so many different ways to separate and segregate humanity. Constant battle to divide and conquer. And actually what is happening right now, it's supposed to be the biggest division, but it's having the opposite effect. Because more and more people are being rudely awakened, because it's not a gentle awakening what's happening right now.
No.
But it's actually more unifying than dividing. And that's the first time we're seeing it, because we're not in all of this together, but it's very distressing to all of us. Because I know it's a very personal experience, but it's traumatic on a different scale, in different ways, but it is actually unifying. And I do believe in what Jade, not believe it, what I do have an understanding of what Jade was talking about astrological alignments and astronomical alignments and all of these things. What's for the micro, within, without, that sort of like theory. That wasn't very eloquent, but you know what I mean. On micro level, it's the same as macro level.
That's what I was going to say about the personal awakening and then like the collective awakening. So
so people are being awakened, and people are not liking it because they don't like what they see once they're out of their slumber. But that's okay. That's okay, because the old normal was flawed, very, very flawed, and really was not working very well for humanity, because the systems that were established in the last millennia was enslaving. And when Jade was talking about DNA and activating different things, or humanity being deactivated, my personal understanding of that is that yes, you're correct about both of you are correct about the human evolution, and we are being activated on a different level. I think before, humanity was at a place where it wasn't very difficult to divide and conquer it and enslave it. But now, with our evolution, and not just human evolution, but evolution on a much larger scale, the evolution of all there is, and we're part of it. And I would so love to scratch the surface a little bit about different theories and scientific and mystical principles about that. But we are in this huge, extremely sophisticated process, and we're part of it. So at this point in time, it's pivotal. It's happening to everybody. It's happening to the 1% that is keeping humanity the way that it is, but it's also happening to the 99%. and it's also happening
Yeah.
to all there is. So it's a huge process. Nobody can stop. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm just going to say very, very quickly, because it's a huge subject about our as we all know from classical science, from physics and astronomy, the Big Bang theory, well established in classical science, is everything started from a single dot. In other words, everything that exists, it's the particles that came, the shattered particles that came from that single star, right? That's something that classical physics and astronomy have very well documented theory. And then in more modern science, which is quantum physics, which only got into existence in more scientific communities in the beginning of the 19th century. So that is a lot more modern science. One of the main principles on which quantum physics is based is the entanglement principle, which means exactly the same what the Big Bang was talking about, that all pieces in existence in the whole of the universe, in multiverse, start from a single point. So the quantum entanglement talks about how all of these elements are connected or entangled, and in other words, influence. There is a communication, there's a ripple effect across everything. And then,
Oh yeah.
and then we have all the mystics from 3,000, 5,000, 8,000, whatever recorded, different schools of thought in different mystic schools in different ways, all talk about how we're all one. So,
and all the religions, or any religion that you can look at as well, will say the same thing. Like when you look at all of the books, the same stories and the same prophecies, they kind of all work around this same theory, don't they? So how can it be?
isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an amazing subject. Like literally when you first started talking about it, I was like, yes, because it just excites me so much. But I mean, and we were talking about the FBI document when that was talking about the gateway, and it was talking about the vibration of everyone, and like, you know, you can say that that's spiritual, but then it becomes science. So, you know, one of the things that we've spoken about before as well is Joe Dispenza and his conversation on quantum physics and all of that tiny atom, and every single one of us being like something like 99% empty space. Or, you know, how does this work? It's just absolutely blows my mind. If anybody's interested in reading the Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, is the book that really blew my mind in the beginning.
I have that right here.
Oh, it's just incredible. In the pile of books.
I think
Say again, Nia, sorry.
Amazon Prime have the whole series of Joe Dispenza talking about that same subject in such detail. It's very well put together. So either instead of Netflix and mindless entertainment, Spencer.
Yeah. But Joe Dispenza was really the one that melded the spiritual and the scientific together for me, because I always thought that they had to be separate, or I was always told that you couldn't be spiritual and be scientific at the same time. And I knew in my heart that there was some sort of connection between the two, but I had no way.
Yeah. I've always said, ever since I was very young, that I can't understand why science and spirituality is so separate from each other. And you know that I mentioned that during 9/11 was kind of the time that something was shaken loose in my mind. Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but scientists have been looking more in the last few years into how the heart frequency, how the heart can actually emit a frequency, the human heart. And I know a lot of spiritual people are kind of already onto this, is that you can kind of do healing through the heart energy. Some people who've had heart transplants, so say that they've been on the waiting list for a transplant and then they've received a transplant, they've actually ended up adopting some of the memories or personality traits of that person that they got that heart transplant from. And then on 9/11, when we all were witnessing that horrible, horrible event, it was very, very interesting. But scientists noted that quite literally, the magnetic field of the Earth suddenly spiked. And what it is that so many people were witnessing, and there was so much of a point of consciousness on that single event. And there was so much emotion, feelings of care and concern and love. And, you know, there was so much focus on that it actually spiked the Earth's magnetic field. And this is something that like scientists are properly looking into now. And it's called global coherence. So there is actually something called the Global Coherence Project now, where they're actually measuring, and they've also done it the other way as well. So when the Earth's magnetic field spikes or shifts, it tends to have an effect on the human heart energy as well, which again just shows that we're all connected. And you know, the Earth also has her own chakra system. They reckon that the sort of oil, you know, that we kind of harvest from the Earth is the Earth's blood. She has an aura just like humans, and everything is kind of a version of everything else, if that makes sense.
Yeah. When you mentioned the magnetic frequency, I think they call it the Schumann resonance. It is the Schumann resonance, right?
I think it's two different things, because at first I
Oh.
thought, oh no, I've heard about this, the Schumann resonance, but I think they're actually two different things. But the Schumann resonance tends to spike as well. So the Schumann resonance is like the Earth heartbeat, and the I suppose that the magnetic field is kind of like the aura of the Earth. So yeah.
So I keep an eye on the Schumann resonance because I heard about it a few years ago, and it intrigued me so much. And I have been noticing, especially as we've been moving through these times, that it is having spikes in it, and it is weirdly coincidentally happening at the same time that major events are happening in the world. And when you know, especially when you know major news has come out, or a big event has happened, and everybody is collectively feeling sadness or grief, or even like, you know, happiness, the Schumann resonance is alternating, and it's really
you've literally taken the words right out of my mouth, because that was going to be the next point that I was going to make. Is if you think about all this collective fear right now that's going on, and all this confusion, how must that be affecting, you know, it's not only our own personal stuff that we're going through, we're also feeling the collective, we're feeling the Earth's suffering, because I genuinely believe that the Earth feels everything that we're experiencing on the surface. And I mean, if you look at your pets as well, on days when you're feeling maybe anxious or sad or worried, you'll notice that your pets like really cling to you. And so yeah, this idea that of connectedness is so important, and especially now.
Well, when I mentioned about that FBI sort of document, or that CIA document, I think it was FBI, the Gateway Experience.
It's a CIA document.
That in that document, and this is available online for anybody to read through, and it like honestly, if it blows your mind half as much as it did mine, there will be pieces everywhere. Because but it mentions in that document about the human frequency and the Earth's frequency, and how the Earth is has a frequency of like 7.8, 7.9 is the natural, right? And our human frequency differs. So, with all of these electronics that we've got going around, and we mentioned, and we'll probably get into this a little bit later as well, is how can we, you know, help ourselves get through this, what type of things that we can do. And one of the major things that I think that we can do is step away, which I know is so hard to do when there's so much news going on, but step away from social media, step away from the electronics, like try to move yourself away from those low frequency vibrations that are coming from all of the electronics, because I feel like that's just trying to keep us down. So, and then to go out and do things that really lift our spirits, like yoga and meditation and grounding ourselves with the earth. There was something that I read earlier on today that I read a little bit more on, that was saying that if you go outside and you take your socks off and you put your bare feet on the ground and you ground yourself in that way, you are taking all this electromagnetic frequency that you've harbored up throughout the day. And
it's called grounding or earthing.
Yeah, and earthing, and the earth will sort of like you know, balance you back out again, and it's so important. And I used to do it without even realizing how it worked or what it was that I was doing, but I just knew it made me feel good to just go out and put my feet on the grass. And it's blooming cold to do it now, but it's still worth it.
It is. It still feels good even when it's freezing.
It's very invigorating.
Yeah, and that document, sorry, I went off track a little bit there, but that document says even about our frequency, the human frequency, and how far our frequency travels outside of us. So if you think that literally the energy that you are working with, whether you are high vibration or low vibration, whether you're feeling sad or joyful, that is emanating outside of you, and it is impacting the people around you for miles. It's not even that it's
Well,
just.
I know we were just having a conversation earlier, weren't we, about how we know that when we're a little bit stressed or a little bit highly strung, our children will become highly strung, or they'll become a bit hyperactive. This kind of chain reaction is so observable when you pay attention to it.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not just good for ourselves to do it for us personally, but if we have children or we have loved ones, to like really be thinking, how can we balance ourselves out for their sake as well as ours?
Yeah. So we're marrying very beautifully what we just talked about, the connected of all of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm really glad you mentioned those documents that got released, because when I first heard about it, I was extremely excited to get my hands on them, because I wanted to see what's been recorded and what these agencies spend, I think about 30 years in research, specifically doing the stuff that they were doing. So it was a bit of an anticlimax for me, because actually the stuff that was in those documents, there's been scientists doing that sort of work 100 years before that. It's just that the CIA decided, or certain agencies decided to take it up on a different level and really explore all of these concepts and see how they can harvest all of that knowledge. So actually, in those CIA documents we keep talking about, there's nothing that radically new in them. Even somebody that is a household name like Nikola Tesla had these like over 100 years ago, and he's not the only one. He's just a household name and the name of one specific scientist that gets mentioned a lot. But there's a number of people working on similar stuff, and in the field well over 100 years ago. So it's nothing new. It's just like have not been made mainstream.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the story about Tesla. I don't know if you guys know, but he had that invention and he knew so much, and then it was kind of like taken away from him, if you like. And then
his house was raided and all of his research was stolen from him, and then he was imprisoned.
Yeah. And so I then asked the question, why would they not want this to be sort of the knowledge of everybody? You know, if the agenda isn't to keep low
well,
frequency,
actually, Sarah, that leads us, because I know we have an itinerary, but I actually love that we've touched onto the interconnectedness first, because that really felt right. But actually, the first question that I had down for us was how humanity have potentially reached this point, or this crossroads in their evolution. And so I feel like that's a point there where you're just leading into that question beautifully. So why would there be people who would want to maybe, you know, suppress the knowledge and the research that Tesla had done?
Well, I don't know a huge amount about it, so I think Nia knows more about it than I do. But it was just interesting, you know. I think I said when we just finished the last one was that my question is, why would they not want us to know everything he knows, and why would they not want to fast forward that technology as soon as possible? What is it that they want to keep a secret? Do you know what I mean? So that, and then Nia knows more about it, so take it away.
It's what I've read actually makes perfect sense from what we know about how our society has been run for the last, I would confidently say, millennium. So really, in the wake of the Industrial Revolution, well, not in the wake, in the really, at this stage, Industrial Revolution was like in full swing around Tesla's time. So a businessman that was becoming very, very powerful, the Rothschilds, well, they were, yeah, they had the money already from whatever. I don't want to go into that, but actually,
Well, yeah, there was the 13 families, wasn't there, and the 13 family bloodlines who maybe believe that they're special and that their blood is linked to a higher race. But
yeah, what I was going to say is actually they invested, and I would lie if I said the specific number, because I can't remember what the number was, but it was millions of dollars at the time, which was a lot of money. They invested and they sponsored Tesla's search, and it was successful. The reason why they didn't go forward with the technologies is because of the way Tesla had set everything up. And at this point, all of the money that he had in his possession to conduct his studies, all of it was spent. So his inventions didn't have a way to monetize. So the Rothschilds Foundation at the time decided to spend an equal amount of money to take everything down and to hide the technologies, because they went with different inventors like Edison and different people that had a way of monetizing, although their inventions were nowhere near as revolutionary as Tesla's. But it really comes down to the investment couldn't be monetized, so they dismantled everything and destroyed it because it was their property. They paid for it.
And I know a big part of this was that Tesla had really looked into sort of the Egyptian pyramids, hadn't he? And kind of what the Egyptians had been able to achieve. And I think he'd figured out free energy devices, which if you think in terms of sort of like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, who were heavily invested in the banking system and maybe sort of oil in foreign countries and that kind of thing, it wasn't really conducive to them to have this free energy information out there, because obviously that was going to possibly be a real spanner in the works when it came to charging people for energy or for keeping this very precious commodity of oil relevant. And especially as later, you know, the dollar was no longer backed by the gold standard. So we then went into this petrodollar situation with, you know, everything was kind of depending on oil, and that was actually holding up the value of the dollar. So I think that's one of the big reasons why a lot of his research was suppressed, and it would have done so much benefit to humanity. And in reality, I mean, I really think that it would have led us forward in huge strides in terms of like our evolution. And it would have, I don't know if this is a big part of it, but it maybe would have taken away a lot of this survival mentality, because to have energy as a natural given right that we don't even have to pay for, you know, it does take away some of that survival mode.
Yeah, but
from what I can see,
what they were doing was not a benevolent or charitable action. It was an investment for profit. Which, because it didn't fulfill them, it was.
And there's so many everyday things that people will come across now, because sometimes I find that some of these things that we talk about can seem too far-fetched for a lot of people, or too out there for people to wrap their heads around. But when you bring it but down to the everyday sort of like items that we use, light bulbs used to last forever until they decided that they didn't want it to last forever, and so they created, you know, like a particular lifespan for a light bulb. Then you're talking about ink cartridges. You know, ink cartridges, they kind of tell the person that they're running out after so many pages have gone through them, apparently. So, you know, there's all these different things where it works for them to make it works for them, whoever they are, like, you know, high up, to keep us buying things all the time, doesn't it? So, you know, of course they're not going to want Tesla's free energy things, which I've heard is going to be something that we're going to be able to have hold of, like, you know, in the future.
Because
in
he
the
was
very
commissioned. He was commissioned. He was sponsored. He was paid to do his studies.
He was the brains behind it. And then, and
yeah.
you know, Tesla always talked about how he had higher guidance, that he was a big meditator, and that he felt that he had spoken to higher dimensional beings. And that's where a lot of his ideas actually came from, was these conversations during meditation with higher dimensional beings. And I think that, I mean, I don't know him personally, but I suspect that he wanted to bring something very positive to humanity. But because we were in this very much this profit, this capitalism mindset,
Yeah.
that wasn't able to really happen.
Yeah, there's so much stuff in our everyday life that's just built around how to make money all the time. It's just constantly how to make money. And if it doesn't make money, then what's the point in it being here? You know, a lot of people think that it's not going to work, or there's no longevity to it if it's not able to be monetized. So
Mhm.
it makes sense that they would try to hide it.
To me, the problem.
And also, I think,
Sorry,
sorry, yeah, go on.
I think there's a little bit of delay. That's why we sound like we interrupt each other. We should make a sign or something. What I was going to say, following what you said, Sarah, there is no fundamental problem with making money, because for every like service we provide, or goods or anything else, there is going to be some sort of exchange. I think where the problem lies is with
Yeah.
the concentration, the distribution of resources.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And
100%, and I completely agree. Yeah, and you know, this is a huge subject that we could talk about again, about, you know, the way that, especially spiritual people, I think, especially like the light workers of the world, that feel like it's selfish to want money. So glad that you said that, Nia, because, you know, it's not a bad thing to want money for the services that we provide. And I think the problem that is comes from this kind of thing is to deceive people into believing, you know, that there isn't something that could benefit humanity because it doesn't work for a particular organization. That's what I don't agree with. When it comes to needing money or wanting money for services that you provide, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
And then over the last few years, this has become so pronounced that it's like, you know, the wealth of the world has become so much in the favor of this tiny group of people, and where a lot of people are struggling, and they literally are living in this slave reality where no matter how hard they work, because you're always taught when you're growing up, if you work hard and you put yourself into things, then you're going to have success. And then you get into your adulthood and you realize that that's really not the reality. And actually, sometimes the harder you work, the less you end up with at the end of it.
We're conditioned to only strive for so much. We're conditioned from a very, like, from the day that we're born, to be grateful for what we've got, to not try and expand our life to what it is that we really want, to, you know, believe that everything that we want that's outside of what we already have is too greedy or too selfish. And that's not the case at all, is it? Like,
no, we all deserve to live in abundance. That's our birthright, I believe. I mean, this is such an abundant planet with so much to give for everybody. I mean, they talk about the world being overpopulated, and maybe the world is overpopulated, but there is still enough to provide for every single person on this planet, for every single person to live in abundance. And this isn't even about like the spiritual side of things. So I grew up with a huge lack mentality, and, you know, believing that wanting money or wanting to strive for more was greedy or wrong. And I dispelled all of that later in life. And, you know, I'm very good at manifesting at this point in my life, but I know there's a lot of people that feel very stuck, and a lot of it is due to their conditioning of, you must work hard, you must, as soon as you're out of school, you must get a job, you've got to put every hour into that. And then, you know, they get later into life and they realize, I've not been able to experience the things that I truly wanted to experience because I was constantly in survival mode. And I think that's a big trick that's been played on us.
100%. And I think so many people struggle because, like I've mentioned, like I talk about this with my clients, with the whole online business thing, and one of the things that people struggle with is feeling like it doesn't get to be easy, or that it's got to be hard for it to work for them, or as soon as they're doing something they enjoy, that it doesn't make sense that they can earn money from it. And it's so, the doing of the thing is easy. The hardest thing to try and get your head around is the mental blocks, is the limiting beliefs that we have. It's that glass ceiling that we've got that says that we don't deserve better, or that it needs to be more difficult than it actually gets to be. That's the hardest part, is getting the confidence to move forward and do that kind of thing, whatever it is that you want to do, manifesting, creating the business.
And
You know,
believing that you
providing
deserve to be paid well for what you're doing. And then there's particular people who've maybe taken that concept just to an extreme, where they're not working really at all, and they're, you know, they're now, I think it was advertised on the news the other day that the 1% elite now earn, I think it's 80% of the UK's wealth, and then there's 20% that the rest of the population is scrambling over. To me, that is just so far into dystopia. Nobody ever needs that amount of wealth, and you know, this is a point where it's actually being hoarded, and it's being withheld. And really, I mean, we could get right into the financial system and how much of a con it actually is, but that's maybe one for another time.
Yeah. Definitely.
That's where the problem is, because what Sarah was talking about, and what Jade was talking about, it's the same issue. Is what Sarah was talking about is conditioning. That conditioning is by design. That's been designed over centuries. And what Jade was talking about is about the monopolization, concentration of all of the resources. And you know, people are conditioned to be that way. The programs are created for people to be this way because the system was just designed that way. And that's why and going back to normal, it's not a good idea, because that normal was not working well for humanity.
Yes, I was just going to say,
Have a fantastic
the connection between that. Sorry, Nia, I was just going to say the connection between all of that and bringing it back to, you know, the original topic of us all waking up and realizing that there's so much more. That new normal that we can create is to realize that we've been held down for so long internally ourselves, like, you know, through the programming and the conditioning. We believe that we aren't able to have this life of abundance, and you know, the services that we provide are worthy of like the compensation that we want to ask for it. We've been conditioned to believe that that's not true for us, when this new normal that we'll be stepping into and the waking up that we'll have is not just about everything that's wrong in the world, but also how limited we have been for ourselves, and how much more we can expand and you know, grow into this new way of being, where everybody feels like, holy shit, look what I can accomplish now, look at this level of confidence that I've got, and how much energy and, you know, giving I can put into it. It's an incredible thing. I'm so excited.
And you know, even further into that, so like if we're looking at how we've got to this point, I think there's been this, because we're born into this reality and we don't really know what came before, except for what people tell us, what our parents tell us, where our parents may have been under severe conditioning as well. And I think that we are kind of taught this learned helplessness, where, you know, I'm hearing a lot of people who are really fearful about maybe procedures that are being brought into their workplace, or, you know, if I don't go along with this medical agenda, then, you know, I'm so scared to speak out for myself. And, you know, I think we've been kind of bombarded from so many sides. It's not just financial, it's emotional, it's psychological, it's spiritual.
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, at the moment, I've been throwing around the term Stockholm syndrome for a while with this whole thing, because it's kind of like, you know, and people have compared what's going on in the world at the moment with like prisoner of war conditioning and torturing and all of that kind of thing. But the similarities between it are really scary. You know, when you look at the similarities between trying to condition somebody to be in that Stockholm syndrome kind of mentality, and the way that what we're all going through right now, being given just you know, a little bit of freedom and then having it pulled away from us, you know, tempting us, trying to, they're talking about today, like we were saying about neighbors snitching on each other now, or you know, all of that kind of thing.
Or
Like,
it would be inhumane to cancel Christmas 1 week later. Christmas is cancelled. They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. It's a psychological operation.
Yeah, you can see it from a mile off as well. So, you know, and it kind of, it's really, it really makes you angry, doesn't it? Because it's like, how can they get away with doing this to people? So there is
it's because of the learned helplessness. You know, we've always been taught to respect authority. That, you know, even when we go to school, we are taught not to be free thinkers and to have our own minds, but to be able to reiterate what we've been taught, and that is the measure of success within a school. And it's like I was saying earlier this week, authority is the idea that some people are born with more rights than other people. Authority is the idea that some people are born with they're more special, they're more important, they have more importance than everybody else on the planet. And this is an absolute illusion. And of course, the people who have that want to perpetuate that illusion. So they go to great lengths through the media, through the education system, and through the financial system to keep us in these constraints, when actually any idea of authority is always eventually slavery. And now we are seeing, because we can't be blameless, we can't just constantly blame the elites. You know, we have allowed this to unfold this way, and this is why we're being jolted into this very painful and very difficult reality. Nia, are you still there? Do you have something that you want to add here?
Yeah, I'm still here, and I'd like to say that it's very interesting that the conversation went that way. It's to continue with my previous thought. It's all by design. None of this is an accident, and what is happening again and again and again. The only reason why the 1% elite or authority, or whatever you want to call it, is able to do what they're doing is because they're able to push people into consenting, because 99%,
yes,
all that needs to happen is for us to question it. We don't even have to rise against it. If we just question, that is it. It's over. Game over.
Yeah. So just to interject there, sorry, because I know that you will have so much more to say about this, but one of the things that people keep saying to me, or people have said to me so many times before, is, what is the point in me knowing about this? Because I can't change the world.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, what can little old me do?
I can't do anything. I'm powerless and helpless, and I can't do anything. No, you're not powerless or helpless. Literally, to see the prison is to leave the prison.
Yeah,
it's that
just
simple.
to be aware of it. And even though my husband said the other day, he was like, I can finally see how manipulative the media are about certain particular things that are going on. And I was like, thank God we've got another one on the side, on the good side. And he was like, but what do you want me to do about it now? And I was like, you don't need to do anything now. You just need to know. That's all that you need to do. You don't have to go and riot the streets, or, you know, do anything like this, or go and protest anything. You don't even need to peacefully protest if that's not what you want to do, if you don't feel comfortable doing that. But just to know gives you so much freedom from all of this, and then allows you to
I have a lot to say about that, actually, and I'm going to bring that up a little bit later, but yes.
And then we have knowing. It's actually fantastic, but if we bring the conversation back to the connectedness, that knowingness,
yes,
that awareness, it's energy. So you said earlier about the 99.9% of the empty space between the atoms in our bodies and everything in the universe. So that empty space, quantum physics, and actually classical physics and mystics, mystics call it the emptiness, the nothingness. Physicists call it the dark matter, and the dark matter, it's called dark matter. It's because they're in the dark about it. So that's the only reason why it's called dark matter. So that 99% of emptiness is where the creative power lies. At the 0.0.
It reminds me, Nia, sorry, it reminds me of how they say the junk DNA. There's nothing junk about that DNA, and the black matter, oh, it's just nothingness. The junk DNA is just junk. this is one of the big betrayals as well.
Yes, it is.
Sorry, just wanted to add that there.
Well, so when you have that awareness, we have with my closest circle of friends, we have an expression that awareness is a bitch. Because when you first become aware of something, just like your husband said, well, what am I supposed to do with it? Because it invokes different emotions out of your comfort zone. You have to deal with it. So because you have to deal with it, and these emotions are going to create a wave of energy. And that wave of energy
Yes.
is going to create an outcome, because this is how this universe works. It's based on energy and vibration, and knowing about something. It's actually being aware and making up your mind of what does that mean to you. And when you make that decision, that is your free will, that is your birthright, that is your creative, that is your God part of yourself, of how you create reality. So knowing about it, it's deciding what does it mean to you, and what you want to happen from this point. It's extremely powerful. So it's not, like you said, Sarah, it's not about rioting. It's about making a decision. I don't like this shite. So this is what this is what, but
this offends my soul, and I no longer consent. And as a God sovereign being, I will no longer go along with this. You're not getting my point of consciousness. You're not getting my point of focus. You're not getting my attention, because this is the only thing that perpetuates this myth of authority, is the fact that they have our focal point, they have our attention. And this is why now you can't even go on your phone without, I go on Instagram and I have a pop-up COVID news. I go into the supermarket and there's a tannoy on every 15 minutes telling me to be afraid. I get to the checkout and there's newspapers with the most terrible headlines you can imagine telling me to live in fear. And then I come home and I go to my email and I have another message telling me to live in fear. And they're everywhere, because they want the point of focus on them constantly, because this is the only thing, the only way that they can perpetuate this myth of authority, which is actually slavery. It's an idea that we are not interconnected. We are not all fragments of source energy that are all from the same place. We are separate. Some people are superior. You can have organization, you can have structure, but this idea of authority it will always turn into slavery.
But this knowledge that everybody is becoming aware of, like the awareness of what is actually going on, and the opening of the eyes, kind of, so to speak, creates, without you even realizing it, it almost creates this energetic shield around you. Whereas every time then you go into the supermarkets and you see and you hear the tannoy and you see
you don't notice it anymore. Yeah,
it just literally bounces off your energy shield, like it can no longer touch me. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's super powerful, just that alone.
That's such a good point, Sarah. That really is.
It's a really good point, because once you have chosen, so you're aware, and instead of being fearful, with the awareness, you have made a different choice. With your free will, you've decided this is where my focus is going to be, so this is how I'm going to experience reality. That sends ripples. That sends ripples, not just every single human being on this planet, but that sends ripples through the universe. This is how powerful this interconnectedness, I said it properly this time.
Yes.
Works.
Yes, I was on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, and I never go on Facebook anymore. I hate Facebook, but I was on Facebook, and there was a guy on there who regularly goes to protests and things like that. He's a real warrior for truth. And he said that something like, at this point in time, if you think kumbaya meditation type crap is going to save us, you're off your rocker. This is time to fight. And honestly, I started laughing. So I completely related to where this guy was coming from, because I understand that things are out of control and we need a solution. But I just thought, buddy, you don't know how wrong you are. Literally, if we had ever been allowed to understand ourselves as energetic beings, if we'd been educated in a different way by loving, nurturing, honest, truthful, transparent people, then we would understand the power of our thoughts, the power of our meditation, the power of the fact that if you walk down the street without a mask and you smile at everybody that you encounter and you talk to people, it's like we were in the car the other day and we went down a road we didn't know. We had to turn around and a lady was walking her dog and she looked at me and she smiled, and so I smiled back and I waved, you know, and neither of us had masks on. And I felt that energy between us, that loving energy. And this is the beauty of the human species, is that we, you know, these masks, I worry for my little baby boy, because we'll go into the supermarket sometimes and I can see him looking around at everybody like this, like, why can't I read their face? You know, he doesn't understand. You can see his little mind working, that he doesn't understand why he can look at me and he can see a big smile and a loving face. And then he's trying to make this connection with other people around him and they all have their face covered. And this is, again, this is by design. And this is trying to steer us away from our true nature. And there's no fighting needed. It's all about energy and vibration. And if we have that confidence to step into our God-given sovereignty, our God-given right, and we feel that confidence in ourselves that I don't have to go along with this. There is nothing in my soul contract that is obligated to go along with this psychosis, this madness. Once you break free from that, everybody looks at you like, what's their secret? I want that secret. They look happy in the middle of all of this. And yes, they may have their challenges.
We can give him that secret. The secret is, even if you're not on a deep spiritual awakening journey, actually, all we have to do is, no, I don't like this. I do not consent to this. This is all we ever have to do for this to stop. Not comply.
Yes.
Not play the game. Simple no. You don't need to be.
And let's just make it clear as well. I just want to make it clear for anybody who's watching this. We're not saying get into trouble. We're not saying try and break the law or try and get the attention of the authorities or anything like that. We're not saying become a revolutionary necessarily. We're just saying in those moments where you can smile at a stranger or you can have a conversation that's truthful and authentic, go into that moment. Don't be frightened. You know, we're not advocating that people necessarily put themselves in danger. You know what I mean? But we're trying to say, don't lose the things that make us a human. And this point of sovereignty and non-consent is the most important truth of all.
To say, just most importantly, it's do not react from a place of fear. If something doesn't make sense, just pause, just question it. That is enough. So yes,
how I like to sort of say this is, there's two sides of the coin. There's the reaction and there's the response. So if we, you know, one of the things that we learn as we're going through this spiritual development and just any general like growth or maturity or wisdom that we learn throughout our lives is that we do really need to, it's so quick for us to just react to something. We see something, we react to something. But if we can just take that time out to just respond to it and have that moment where we think, what's true for me? What do I feel like is the right form of action to take? Like Nia was saying, to respond to something.
From a loving place rather than a fearful place, yes.
Yeah, it makes such a huge difference. And the topic that we're talking about when it comes to making a choice about what we feel is true for us, it is in every single form of our life. It's every single area of our life we are able to do that. So what I find is that when people are starting to feel a little bit contracted and down about everything that's going on, we have the tendency to jump on that downward spiral and then carry it throughout every other area of our lives, right? Because we just kind of, it's kind of infectious almost. So once you start realizing how powerful you are in the decision that you can make and taking back your ability to choose, then every other area of your life is able to be improved by having that same thought as well. You know?
Yes. So there's another thing that I've noticed is you were talking about people just reacting rather than maybe thinking things through and forming a proper response. something that I feel like that has been played on, that's maybe led us to this point, and I can't take credit for this thought. I've been watching a lot of Mark Passio videos. I absolutely love that guy, and he talks a lot about how if the left or right brain becomes very imbalanced, so if we look on the left brain side, and I know that both of you are going to relate to this immediately, if we look on the left brain side, if somebody's in a left brain, if they're too far into the left brain, they're going to be so much about everything has to be fact, everything has to be black and white. You know, they're not in touch with their intuition and their empathy quite as much. So you may be talking to people on social media or wherever, and there are certain people that will pop up who are, they're intellectual, but they're not necessarily emotionally intelligent. And then on the other side of things, we have people in this very deep right brain imbalance, where there's certain people that I've tried to talk to and I've said, look, I'll show you some facts, I'll present some facts to you about whatever, you know, and they'll say that's not true, and I'll say, well, why? We can see it there in black and white, you can read that, you're an intelligent person, why don't you agree with that? And they'll say, well, I don't agree with it. And when you really peel back the layers, what you find out is the reason that they don't believe it is because it makes them feel bad, it hurts their emotions, so they can't align with that, and they're actually building a belief system on what feels good or bad. And then this is the right brain imbalance. And then on the left brain imbalance, you know, if I can't see facts in every way, and if I can debunk that in some way without any empathy or you know, intuition, just purely through facts, then it's not true. And I think that the kind of the deep state or the elite, however you want to put it, they've really played on trying to create this imbalance. So if you're spiritually in tune and your chakras are open, and then your left and right brain are in balance, you become an unstoppable force, because you have that logic, you have that ability to weigh up reason and facts, you have that deep empathy and that deep love, but you're not pulled into a toxic area of, you know, whichever side of the brain that you're more dominant in. And I see that all the time. And sorry, yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's two things about this. There's the left and the right brain is something that the sort of celebrities and the elite kind of people of the world play on so much, and you can see it in their symbolism, because this is a satanic thing that they do, the symbolism of the left eye and the right eye. That's why you see some celebrities covering the right side of their face as like a subliminal message, almost, to lead people into this left brain thinking, right? Because they don't want you to have that balance. They don't want you to, especially not to be in the right brain, where all the creativity is, all of the ability to attract and manifest things comes from, majority of the time, the right brain, right? And then to feel that emotional connection with things all around. And also the second point I was going to make is that there's also the cognitive dissonance that we see so much when people have this form of awakening and it happens to them. First of all, we see something that we have never seen before, and then the first thing that we want to do as a reaction to that is, from almost a subconscious reaction, is it hurts us so much and so deeply that the easiest thing for us to do is for our brain to just completely switch off and go, that can't be true, and the cognitive dissonance appears, right? And then you can just brush it off and pretend like it never happens and go about your day. The hardest thing and the most brave and courageous thing for us all to do is to feel that emotion, like you said, Jade, and to guide ourselves through it, and just understand that it is going to hurt, but to get out the other side of that then is where the truth
to go through. Yes. And I'll just make this really quick point and then we'll go to Nia. I said earlier, you know, that a lot of people have called me a kook for a lot of years, and then suddenly they're all in my inbox as soon as this kind of Rona situation popped up, and they're saying, what do you think about this? So I typed back, okay, well, with love in my heart and compassion, I'm not going to hold any grudges for the fact that you thought I was a conspiracy theorist. I'm just going to go back and let you know what I thought. So I would write that back to them, and then they would come back and go, oh no, that's too far out. I can't believe that. I don't like the way that feels, sorry. And they'd be gone again. And,
you know, sorry to interject again, but it just goes back to what we were saying earlier about us being then quite angry at people then you know, put the guard up again. But it's only natural. I mean, I did it so many times before I was really able to allow myself to see it as it really is. You know, I was like, oh, it's poppycock.
I don't
But
think anybody just wakes up. Nobody is just awake overnight. We all wake up for a bit. We go back to sleep. We revert. It's like a turtle coming out of a shell, and then, oh no, it's a bit dangerous. I'll go back in.
yeah, you just have
And
to
then
find your
eventually we
trust.
get to that point beyond return where you cannot go back into the shell. You're out there. You're awakening, and you might. I think there's deception at every level, and there's traps at every level that we can fall into, whether it's a movement, whether it's a political stance, whether, you know, the New Age movement, I believe, is very much a trap. And that, again, that's a whole another video that we could maybe discuss, is the traps that people fall into in awakening. And even when you're really far on this journey, you can still fall back into those traps that have been set for us. And, you know, this is a huge operation.
The guru trap.
Yeah,
What's that? Sorry, Nia?
the guru trap.
The guru trap. Yes. Oh, I've been in that one.
Yeah, but equally, you know, when we do fall into those potholes like we do, it's all part of the journey, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, we shouldn't feel guilty about when we realize something, because this has happened to me before, where I started to believe something and I thought, oh yeah, there might be something in that. And then I've come to move away from it because I thought, actually, that doesn't resonate with me so much. And then I've been angry at myself because I felt like I've wasted time in that particular, you know, area when I could have been focusing on something else. But that's okay, because it is all such an incredible journey of, like, you know, obstacles. If everything was smooth sailing all the time, none of us would be in this mess, and you wouldn't have the duality. You wouldn't have that polarity between light and dark. You have to have the darkness and the obstacles and the bad things, and
yes,
to see and appreciate the light.
But the most important thing with the whole duality, where I am at this point in time of my own learning, or my own growth, or whatever you want to call it, I just don't want to call it journey because it's such a regurgitated word. in my learning is, for example, I'm an extremely inquisitive and very curious person, and I read and research quite extensively things that I get into. So for me, anything I learn with the next kind of like level, a lot of the stuff that I have learned before no longer fits my picture, because it's like everything is like a puzzle piece, and I'm creating a picture of understanding and comprehension, and I've learned new facts. So something I may have rejected because it no longer resonates or no longer fits the picture I'm creating. So that's okay. We can take that out, put the new learning in, because it makes sense for where we are right now, right? But the other point I was going to make about the learning, that duality, I have a new understanding about duality. There's no longer anything in the negative and positive. There's only two different principles. Like you pointed out, Sarah, that the light has one sort of set of qualities, and the dark has a different set of qualities. And so that applies to everything else that we currently perceive as duality, because nothing is negative and positive, good or bad. If we transcend that way of thinking, it's so much more helpful, because then we can draw from absolutely everything and create something better out of all of it. That's
and you mentioned earlier about that being your integration of self, and understanding that when you were going through that angry phase of trying to understand everything that was going on, that you weren't angry with yourself for going through that, because you understood that as being just that integration, and you love that part of you as well. I love that.
I'm so glad
true.
you brought that up, because actually that ties in so beautifully what we're talking about right now. It's precisely the same principle. That's why I no longer use the term shadow, because it doesn't make sense to me. There's just, I mean, from where I stand right now, it's just a different part of myself that deserves to be loved just like any other part of myself, and it's got its rightful place. I will share something a bit personal. I don't know if it's for the audience this is going to be released, but it makes a specific point. One of the things that was very interesting for me to integrate was the bitch that I can be.
Oh, you should definitely integrate the bit.
I'm not ashamed of my inner bitch.
So
Resting bitch face is my life, ladies.
yes, me, because that was part of which I wasn't specifically proud of, and I wanted to transcend that and let it go or transform it or anything else. And it wasn't until I was ready to own that part of myself that I can own it and love it just equally as the eloquent, gentle, or kind, or funny person that I can be as well. These are different parts of who I am. And so there's no duality. I appreciated what the bitch can bring into my life, what she had brought into my life. She's a real warrior, and she is epic. Just don't draw her out, because she's like the floor with you. And
yes, I love it. Sometimes you need, and that bitch can lead you to being that sovereign being as well. Like that can be how you're led to your empowerment.
Yes, absolutely. It's part of your empowerment. So I no longer need to see any parts of myself or as negative or positive. They just have different qualities. And that is very easy. It makes the process very easy to look at the different parts of yourself and integrate them. And in the same way, when we were talking about duality in the world, it's the same thing. Different things have different qualities. What is important is how are they used? You know the famous quote that with electricity, you can cook a meal or you can kill a man.
Yes.
So,
well, do you know, I've got to interject here because I agree and disagree with this concept. So I feel as though you're absolutely right in the sense that what our job is to be the observers of our experience. And I genuinely believe that before we come into this reality, we agree with what we're going to do. Everybody's the same. We're coming in, we're learning a specific set of lessons, and we do agree to negative and positive experiences. And it's up to us how we handle that. But I also feel as though there's a little bit of a new age trap there as well, where it's, you know, nothing's negative, nothing's positive, you know, everything's positive. And when you look at things like, this isn't something that I really want to go into in this call, but when you look at things like the SRA, and that was one thing that was really hard for me to wake up to, is the, you know, satanic ritual abuse of children and that kind of thing. I think we've been programmed and conditioned a little bit through the New Age movement to believe that there's no such thing as duality, or there's no such thing as darkness, there's no such thing as evil, when in reality there absolutely is such a thing as evil. I mean, whether or not we all agree to the experience that we have when we come here, I think for you, Nia, and for me and for Sarah, because even though we maybe had our shadow self, whether we like the term or not, because we're good people, you know, we never had to integrate something truly dark and disturbing and devastating. But in terms of some of the things that are going on in the world right now, some of the things that are coming to our attention, I almost feel like it's kind of dangerous to have this idea of there's no duality, there's no darkness. To me, there really is a sense of darkness, and there really is a sense of evil, and it does exist. But like you say, it's how we're gonna, we always have to come back to being the observer in this reality.
I think the buzzword that,
whether it exists or not, it absolutely exists. And this isn't about everything is positive. This is not what
it's about what's within.
You said that because I can actually make that statement clearer. So there's absolutely everything exists, and that's why I'm going to say completely clear that it's not about everything being positive or everything being negative. It's about actually discerning what's what, so we can decide what does that mean to us. And that's why I agree with the statement that yes, there is evil, and yes, there is other actions. So when we discern that there's something we don't want, we don't agree with, we don't consent with, we should definitely
Yes, exactly.
up on it. But uh, but it's important the duality to be looked at from a point of view of neutrality. You just neutral, just able to discern what's what, and you can make up your own mind about it and remain sovereign and take action
Yes.
and be aware and etc. etc.
No, I'm really glad that we just kind of cleared that up, because I know there'd be some people out there that would sort of be thinking, well, you know, you're justifying certain things, and that's not what we're sort of like saying here. We're talking more about on the personal level of when you're doing that work, and like I said, it's so important to always go back into that point of observer.
I think the term that is thrown around the internet quite a lot at the moment is the spiritual bypassing thing, is to pretend
Yes,
it isn't happening so that you don't have to deal with it. And
Yeah,
and
that is not the answer. Yes.
going around it.
absolutely. That's a very good point, Sarah. That's absolutely spot on, because people are lulled into the state, you know, like Jade said, the toxic spirituality or new age, or
Yeah.
well, like I called it the guru syndrome. You're allowed in just
Yes.
false sense of so what Sarah was saying, it's absolutely spot on. Do not be allowed into that say false sense. Always perceive the world with a huge, massive sense of discernment and being able to observe it, make a decision with your own free will. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, and I think it also touches on that right and left brain thinking. Sorry, Jade. I think it touches on the right and left brain thinking as well, because like when you're in your left brain and you think it's black and white, it's not just good or bad. It's this huge spectrum of, you know, emotions and feelings and situations that are happening in the world, and it can be anywhere on that scale. So to maybe
everything in between.
yeah, to think of it as a scale rather than it being good or bad, then, you know, in terms of everything that you're going through. I fell into the whole spiritual bypassing kind of positive thinking thing years ago in my early 20s, when I'd gone through the hard stuff physically, and so I was trying to understand it mentally, like I've said before. And I went through this phase of like, you know, everything is positive, nothing can ever go wrong, and if anything does go wrong, there's a good reason why that's happening. And I understand still that everything happens for a reason, but I was very much not willing to look at the negatives of anything, because I tried to take a positive spin on it. And my family then gave me the term, you know, the hippie or whatever, because they were like, you know, she doesn't accept that anything is negative in the world. Everybody is good, and, you know, there's no negativity whatsoever. And I went through a phase like that for a long time.
I think we all have, actually.
Yeah, and I think,
do you know what it is though? It's when you actually really do face your spiritual journey properly, and you do look at that trauma that you've been carrying, and you look at the heaviness that you've been carrying, and when you come through that and you actually clear it, what's really interesting is you tend to get to a point where you're not experiencing duality so heavily. So one thing I've heard this year, or sorry, in 2020, from a lot of my very spiritual friends is, I can see and I can observe that all of this awful stuff is happening in the world, but my life is just getting better and better. It's getting more harmonized. I feel like I'm learning the lessons I need to learn. I'm going through the best growth of my life. I'm attracting everything that I want to me. And, you know, I'm having to now work through this kind of a bit of guilt that everybody else is suffering. And, you know, because I've had this opportunity to get to this spiritual clearing first, I'm now at this wonderful point where duality is actually playing a very small part in my life, and things actually are positive. But they've had to go through this tunnel of learning and clearing through their trauma and their work and everything else to actually get to that point. And that's the real thing. So one of the traps, like I was talking about, is a lot of people will, you know, maybe they'll turn to religion, and, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. I do believe that aspects of religion have been another trap for us. And then maybe they'll come out of that, or the more spiritual, sensitive, right-brained people might go towards the New Age movement, and then they kind of fall into this trap where you're not allowed to talk about anything negative. That's not spiritual, and this is an absolute crock of shit. You know, you have to go through all of that kind of difficult stuff in order to get to that point where you kind of transcend duality. And when you're there, it's very, very beautiful. And you can still be in that observer point where you can see that other people are going through difficult things and you feel absolute compassion for them.
I don't know, for me, about being the observer is that it is, you know, the saying is how we do one thing is how we do everything. And that's the same with, you know, observing our thoughts and understanding is that it's not only critical when you're awakening and you're seeing all of this stuff to choose, you know, how it feels to you and what it means to you, but in every area of your life, then when you become the observer of your thoughts, you can catch that subconscious programming, that you know, the limiting beliefs that we were talking about. You can catch all of those as well by becoming that observer, and it just gets easier over time. So don't kick yourself in the, you know, believing that you just become the observer and then all of a sudden everything, you can catch everything. This stuff, this programming is so deep within our systems, within our mind, that it's going to take a while to learn how to catch those thoughts, and it just gets easier over time.
Going back to the point of being the observer, I think when we develop that capacity to be the observer, it's a much kinder way of being towards ourselves. And also when we're simply observing others, we also have much larger capacity to be kind to them as well. So
Yes.
It's just a gentler, kinder way of managing ourselves and others. So there's a huge benefit from developing that skill to be the observer, because we can be the much kinder and gentler versions towards ourselves and all others. So that's a huge benefit.
I absolutely agree. Okay, so at this point, I think we've already gone into some big stuff. And I know the point Nia made is probably the biggest point that you can make about the consent and the sovereignty. And that's something that I'm probably going to make a few videos about because I think that's so important. But we're just going to go into a little bit about how we feel that people can move forward, maybe some solutions, some advice, that kind of thing. Because I think a lot of people feel that there's many speakers out there that will point out the issues, but they don't offer any solutions. I know we're bursting with solutions, so maybe we're just bringing something new here, which is amazing. But yeah, who'd like to go first? I know I've got tons of notes on this, so I don't want to completely dominate the conversation. So what do you guys think?
I'll start then by just saying a couple of things. Two of the things that I find you know, have been the most beneficial for me is getting back into meditation, or, you know, because you can have a consistent practice. I don't know if you guys agree, but you can have that consistent practice and then you can feel like you don't really need it as much anymore. Sometimes maybe you don't have time, but it's so important to even just do like 10 minutes of quiet time where there's no technology, no social media, and you just sit with, even if you just sit with your thoughts. If you're very new to meditation, some people can feel like it's the hardest thing in the world to do, to push your thoughts out of your mind, and it does get easier. I know that a couple of people have asked how do they get started with meditation. So there's the Headspace app that you can download. They do like free 10 days free, I think it is, on the Headspace app, so that you can start following those meditations as guided ones to begin with. But they're really good at helping you to just move thoughts out of your mind, and how to think of it and imagine the thought floats in, and then just to gently get back to the breath and feel how the body feels in the moment. It's something that is really underrated, I think, is meditation, and a lot of people will just push it aside and say, well, I just don't have time for it, it's just not that important to me. But
at this point in time, like, meditation is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. And there's a saying that I love that says, if you should meditate for 30 minutes every day unless you don't have time, and then you should meditate for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And my husband would even testify to this, that he's been you know, getting into that, as well as getting into yoga with me as well, and he's really seeing the benefits already. So, you know, it's not something that's just for women either. Like, men can really get into yoga as well and enjoy it. It's just so it's such a benefit to us mentally and physically in terms of yoga. And then the second thing that I would say is just, I mentioned it briefly earlier, is just to ground yourself outside. Just get rid of that low frequency energy that's just buzzing around us all the time, and just to ground yourself with the earth and let that sort of cleanse you almost. And you'll be surprised at how beneficial that is, and how you feel about that, even in these cold times. Don't freeze your feet off, but just ground yourself for a couple of minutes.
In terms of like meditation as well, I'd just love to say that anybody who feels they're a little bit more than a beginner and they're a bit more advanced, I love Dr. Virtual 7 on YouTube. So it's DR Virtual and then number 7. This guy is an earth angel. He's a wizard, and he has helped me to have so many incredible personal experiences, and I have no affiliation to him whatsoever. I just love his meditations.
If we just go basic and super easy, I've suggested in previous conversations for absolute beginners, so for people that don't know where to start, it's actually an ancient mystical open eye meditation with a circle, just a circle, and right at the center of it is a dot. Just looking at that dot, your brain knows how to rearrange it, and the focus is entirely on just breathing. Just the only thing you can think of, anything else is dismissed completely. It's just breathe in, breathe out, rhythmic breathing, and open eye meditation. You can start doing 2, 3, 5, 10 to 15 minutes. And that dot creates miracles for people. That's the super basic one. So
yeah, I love that word. And
you know what, that's so interesting, because the whole thing about, first of all, the breathing was how I really learned to meditate, because I couldn't meditate. And then when I learned to concentrate on my breathing, I realized that my thoughts would slow down. So that was a huge thing for me. But this thing about the dots, I haven't heard of this meditation particularly, but I know that a lot of people, when they get a bit more advanced into meditation, often they do see a dot in their third eye. And I know I see that quite often. I'm not sure what that's all about, but
I see, you know, like a light that just pulses through.
Oh, that's third eye activity, is that? Yeah.
Like,
yes, it brings you to center. It brings you to
is that
center.
what it is?
Yeah. But for people that don't understand, the dot and the breath, and you can download an app as well. Not that I want people to go back to technology, but you can download an app just to understand what it is, where you can where it's breath exercise or guided breath work. And there's an app that you can download. I've forgotten the name of it now, but it shows you the dot, and it shows you the expanding circle, and then the non-expanding circle going back in, and it just allows you to just concentrate on that and breathe with it first. Yeah. And then once you understand that, then you can then mentally picture that instead of, you know, seeing it. But
I find it just appears, like I'll just close my eyes and all of a sudden there's a dot there.
Well, I was thinking about just draw you can just draw on a bit of paper and literally just stare. You don't imagine it. That's like, it's a super easy way. There's no technology. You can do it anywhere, anytime. It's just very, very basic, but it's incredibly powerful. And Jade, I will send you some stuff, because actually it's a very ancient and really powerful meditation. And then the upgrade from that is if you stay in the Sri Yantra, and apparently with the Sri Yantra and staring in the center of a Sri Yantra, 20 minutes a day could bring you up to genius level. To be honest with you, I haven't tried it with the Sri Yantra, but it's a pretty awesome claim.
Well, send me it, absolutely. I mean, I've been extremely lucky, because I went from being an absolute nightmare meditator where I just couldn't meditate, and somehow I went to an advanced meditator over a couple of years where I could go into 0 point. I mean, I could make a whole nother video on things I've seen during meditation that have just blown my mind. And I think that's another great thing that we should come back and talk about, because that's so important. I think a lot of people think meditation, oh, well, it'll make you feel relaxed and a bit more clear. No, there is a whole other world that you can discover through meditation. Also, everybody needs to be meditating.
Yeah, even if your goal is just to relax and just to help you work through some of the emotions that you're going through because of everything that's happening, and to try and get your head around the sort of feelings around it all, then just to have that meditation as just a cleanser almost, even if your journey is not to go further with it or to become an advanced meditation guru or whatever.
And
Just
even
to,
the healing and the
Allow you to
clearing
pause.
sometimes.
It's a tool that allows you to pause, so you
yes,
can get
Yes.
more clarity in whatever it is that you need to be doing, or any situation. It could be a challenging situation, it could be an exciting situation. Any situation where you need to gain clarity, you can pause and do something very, very simple that even doesn't involve technology.
I think as well, like a lot of people don't realize how much weight and how much pain and how much potentially trauma and fear they're carrying. And then when you go into meditation, you do that chakra clearing, you feel like something's been lifted off you, and it's just this incredible feeling of lightness where you can walk away and you just light. You have this skip in your step. It's just wonderful when you really get into it. And I know a lot of people just find it hard to start, but my advice would just be persevere.
Yes, people can get really disheartened in the beginning because it's like the first time I tried it, you know, I felt like irritated. I couldn't get my thoughts out of my head. Just ended up making me feel more angry rather than relaxed, and I was annoyed.
That's
and
a
then
sign
the
that
second
it's that
time
you
it was the
need to do
same.
it.
Yeah, but with time, just like give yourself that patience and that grace that we've spoken about so many times during this call, and then just, you know, keep at it, because it's working. Even if you feel like it's not, it's still working. It's still allowing you to process what's going on underneath the surface of all that.
And truthfully, even if you're an experienced meditator, it happens to me now. Sometimes I really struggle to get into the space because it just happens. It's not a big deal.
Oh,
Everyone's
absolutely. Same
human.
with me. Same with me.
Yeah, we're all human at the end of the day. Like, you know, we can't be expected to, you know, be on the straight and narrow all the time. It's not what it's about. Some people that are watching might not understand what the 0 point is. So do you want to like explain a little bit about that?
So I didn't actually understand the 0 point myself until I got into it personally, and then I heard other people talking about it, and I was like, oh, that's what it's called. But 0 point is, once you kind of become quite adept in meditating, you can get there very, very quickly. So I can usually get there in a couple of minutes now when I meditate. But say, for example, if you're somebody who experiences chronic pain every day, and you know it's very difficult to disconnect from that, when you're in 0 point, you generally don't feel any pain. You don't really feel like you're in your body, even though you are. I'm not talking about kind of a paralysis situation. If you want to wiggle your toes, you can still wiggle your toes, but unless you do something like that, you can't feel your body whatsoever. It's like you're floating. Your mind becomes completely clear. You're back in that complete link with God's source. There's nothing that's frightening you. There's no thoughts in your mind. It's a very beautiful place to be in. And people sort of say, how do you get to that? And really, it'll just take practice. And when you get into that, you'll know you're in it. Absolutely. There's still a level of your conscious mind working, but it's distant from you. It's not all encompassing in that kind of state.
So does it feel like, you know, because I get this moment sometimes where it feels like you're just in the now. Is that a good way of describing it? You're like in the present moment, and the present moment is always right now. There's no future, there's no past. It's just right now. Like that bit just went, that's history now.
Quite literally, you're back to your natural state, because time is a man-made construct in a way. And, you know, in the spirit world, there is no real sense of time. And I like to think about sort of this time between lifetimes, you know, when maybe we die and we go back to where we come from. And it's like you can jump to any point. And actually, if you get into meditation enough, you can do that in meditation, where you can go to any point. Human beings are time travelers. You know, we're completely oblivious to this. We are timeline jumpers. We're astral travelers. We're remote viewers. There's so many things that we can do. These are not limited to just a few people. This is everybody can do these kind of things. And when you're in the 0 point, you then have the potential to start activating all of those things. Or you can just be in the 0 point, because it's absolutely blissful, and everything that you're worrying about, all of your pain, all of your worries, they don't matter. You go back into your original state. So it's wonderful, and it really does make meditation so worthwhile.
Yeah, and it just begins with that 10 minutes
Difficult
a
to
day.
describe the 0 point. It's quite tricky because it's a personal experience.
Yes.
Sense of bliss and sense of weightlessness definitely comes into that description, but it's difficult to pinpoint and explain.
It
Yeah.
is, yes, absolutely. That's a really good point, because sort of when Sarah asked me that question, it's how do you describe the 0 point?
Yeah, it just comes up every time the 0 point is mentioned. There's always somebody that says, you know, what do you mean? And you're just kind of like, oh, well, it's difficult.
You'll know it when you get there. It's just like the Kundalini awakening. People say, oh, well, describe the Kundalini awakening. You can't describe it. You can try, and maybe the person will understand, but they need to then have their personal experience, and then they'll understand, and then they'll realize that you can't convey these things in words. It will always fall short.
Yeah.
But once you're in it, you'll be like, oh, I know what this is. I've heard about this.
One thing that I just wanted to mention as well is with the yoga thing before, you know, we move on to the next one, is that there's a yoga challenge that's on every January by, I'm not affiliated with her at all, but by a girl called Adrienne on YouTube. So it's Yoga with Adrienne. Her name is spelled Adriene, I believe. But I'm on day like 8, and I do it every single year. I've done it every single year for the past like 6 years. And it's just amazing. I love it. And that's a really great way to get into beginners yoga, and then you can take it from advanced from there. So even if you're an advanced yogi, it's a good thing to get into, because, and it's the same with meditation actually. It's never a case of you go from beginner to intermediate to advanced. It's always a practice. That's why they call it a yoga practice and a meditation practice. It's have you practiced it today? It's not have you done advanced level, or have you done expert, or have you done beginner today? It's just have you done it? Have you practiced it today?
And do you know another thing that's absolutely wonderful about yoga or Pilates, or for us, like we have a huge allotment. We love to just go grow food and dig the soil and that kind of thing. It's getting into the body, because so many people in this day, they're so in the chatter of the mind, they're so in the Maya, and it's like a prison. It's like a hell for some people, you know, being in this constant chatter of the mind. And so we need to learn how to drop into the body and be in the body. And sometimes, you know, even if you just go outside and you go and buy a beautiful flower, and you get your hands in the soil, and you dig a space with that flower, and you put it in, you lovingly wrap the soil around the roots of that plant. This is another way to be in the body, and it's a type of meditation.
It's a very good point about being in your body, and I like what Sarah suggested, and I like the conversation that you picked up, Jade, from there. So whatever practice you're going to have, it's important to get into your body every single day. Be able to connect, because we're not just the body, we're not just the soul, we're not just the spirit, we're a whole system.
Yes.
And being able to balance the whole system on a daily basis, or on a continuous basis, it's actually where the balance is.
Yeah. There was a study, and I don't know if you guys are aware of it. I think it was a Japanese study on water, and you know, like the majority of our bodies are created from water, and they spoke sort of like positive thoughts to these water molecules, and then they studied the water molecules, and they looked like snowflakes, like individual unique snowflakes, and they were beautiful, like crystallized water, you know, molecules. And then they sort of spoke negatively to this other piece of water, and it just crumbled into nothing. It was just mush. It didn't look beautiful. It was
they
just
did the same thing with plants. They took 2 identical plants, and for one of them they said, I love you, I treasure you, I honor you to this plant. They treated them exactly the same in terms of water and feeding and that kind of thing, and environment. And they went to the other plant, I hate you, you're unworthy. Guess which plant died and which plant thrived?
Yeah, so true. And so, you know, it's easy for us to get stuck into the negative thinking and get on that downward spiral then, but to catch ourselves and then think, oh, actually, this is not what I choose to feed my body with, to feed my mind with. I want to, you know, support myself and bring myself back up and feed myself what it is that I deserve, which is love and positivity and light. And you know, all of that thing, and then we get back on the right side.
Interestingly enough, 2 nights ago, I watched, it was Dr. Emoto's, it was a Japanese doctor, but actually the reason why he did the study with the water was to be able to demonstrate visually the impact on energy and our thoughts, how they manifest. And his main work was about energy healing. But the experiment with the water was a visual representation of how energetic intention works, which I would like to actually move the conversation forward for the next step of what would be very, very useful of practical ways of us to cope and thrive in the situation we're in, is to remember or to learn the true essence of who we are, and we're energetic beings. And if we go back to the conversation where we talked about the connectedness and the entanglement, and also how we impact everything, our energy and intention, people call it intention, but when you intentionally, deliberately focus your energy onto something, it creates an impact. So if you focus that intention on how you can experience yourself, your life, and the world, maybe it will be a good idea to research a little bit more about that and start owning that part of yourself, because it's extremely powerful. I don't know what else to call it apart from extremely powerful.
Yeah. One thing that you know, is also underrated, I think, is journaling. And I know this is like quite a controversial subject for a lot of people, is whether it helps or not. But in terms of exploring who you are, how you deal with things, your mental thought process, what comes up for you when you're navigating the world and all of these different experiences that we're having right now, it is really valuable to be able to do that and just write down your thoughts, and it helps to get it out. So that's something as well that some people can.
And you would never know unless you tried it. How would you know unless you really get it, try it? So
Yeah.
A lot of people are really desperate for this form of self-expression, and I've noticed that a lot of people try to self-express over social media, and they try to write down their thoughts and feelings, and it's not a nurturing environment for that kind of self-expression, in my opinion. I think you need your private journal or somewhere to write down your own thoughts and feelings, and that can be incredible. That's very similar to the chakra healing and meditation, is because all of your pain, your blockages, your stress, depression, everything like that comes from these energetic blockages within the system. So this is another way to be able to release that energy block.
Get it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even though it's not going anywhere, and to be able to take that into that private space, like you say, and not do it on social media, it allows you to have no judgment, because there's only you that's seeing it, and it's not going out where you're expecting validation or some sort of excuse from somebody. Or it's when you do it on social media, there is that term of like looking externally for something to come back to you, when it's internal and it's in the book, and you're just writing your thoughts out.
Part of the problem, and I think especially for women, like when we feel something, it's tremendously healing for us to have somebody validate those emotions. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling stressed, if another woman comes and says, you have every right to feel overwhelmed and you have every right to feel stressed, all of a sudden our healing goes through the roof. Men aren't wired the same way as this, but for women, to get that validation for what we're experiencing, what we're feeling, is so empowering for us. But I think we're looking for it in the wrong place, and we need to be able to be our own validation, that just the fact that I'm feeling this makes it valid.
Yeah.
And that I'm gonna, if it's something that I don't like, I'm not gonna try and force it out of my system. I'm gonna accept that this is the way that I feel right now. I'm even gonna write it down, I'm gonna acknowledge it, I'm gonna nurture it, and then I'm gonna release it, rather than trying to either deny it or look for external validation for that.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, with social media, expressing that on social media is just really not helpful, not healthy. So having that journey with yourself, it's very valuable. Like you said, you give yourself the validation and the healing that you're seeking.
And that actually brings me on to the next point that I wanted to make really beautifully, is that we've already gone into how removing our focus from this illusion of authority and this illusion of control is extremely powerful just in itself, because if nobody's looking, they have no point of power. Literally, this will crumble, and it's crumbling anyway, and this is why they're in our faces at every opportunity. But I feel that this is where maybe mindfulness comes in, and I think consciously choosing what we're consuming is very important for multiple reasons. So I think a lot of us just roll out of bed, we check our phone, we maybe, then go downstairs, we make some breakfast, we do what we've always done, we're stuck in our routines. And I think mindfulness, if we can kick in and we can wake up consciously, maybe do a quick meditation, go downstairs, make a smoothie, make a beautiful bowl of fruit to eat, and actually go through our day like that. And I also think that we need to really start limiting news and social media. And I know we're all bad for being pulled back into social media. We feel like we're going to miss something. We feel like there's some important information there that we need in order to be ready. If something truly important happens, somebody's going to tell us, and actually, I'm loving now that I know a lot of us have migrated over to Telegram groups, which to me just feel like such a better environment, because you're able to kind of align with people that are on your same journey without completely abandoning this kind of need for social media. So that can be a good way to kind of wean yourself away from the social media. But not only that, there's switching off the news, there's getting away from the social media. I think we also have to realize that we're very, very powerful in the sense of everything that we do, everything that we consume, everything that we pay for, everything that we support is our vote. So the voting system in terms of politics has let us down repeatedly, hasn't it? It's let us down. We never feel like we have a say. We need to remove our support from these technocratic corporations. Amazon, I know some people are like, oh, I couldn't live without Amazon. We have to start living without Amazon. It's destroying small businesses. I feel like it's going to get to a point where the only place that we can purchase things is Amazon. And I don't want that. I like freedom of choice. The BBC, we know that they are mind controlling us. We know that they're leading us down a dark path. We know that they've lied to us about very important things. They backed and supported Phoebe Savile for I don't know how long. And yet we're still listening. We need to get rid of the BBC. We need to stop supporting these technocrats, because this is such a huge part of the problem, and a lot of the time we're choosing convenience over morals and over what's right, and we're watching our fellow man be destroyed, their businesses tanking and going bankrupt. We're watching people not being able to escape the trap of their own mind because of corporations like the BBC. We have to start being more conscious in what we consume in every single way.
Yeah.
Jade, if I can just interject here.
Yes.
All of these platforms, they are designed to be addictive. So all
dopamine hits, isn't it?
So yeah, it's all of the algorithms, everything. It's like television programming and all the social platforms. They are by design with mind control, and they are proper addictions. So. Yes. That's how you need to look at it, and that's how you can treat it. Like, you want to break a habit and kind of like heal yourself from an addiction, because that's exactly what it is.
We need to design a 12-step program of, yes. Awakening.
Well, it's the dopamine hit, isn't it? When you go on social media and you're getting likes on your posts, it's that dopamine hit. But dopamine is very different than serotonin. Serotonin is long-lasting and it sustains us, whereas that dopamine hit is quick and fast and then it's gone. And Amazon creates the same dopamine hit. And when you buy something that easily, rather than perusing and browsing and thinking about your decision, you get that dopamine hit, and then you get that crash of, I probably shouldn't have bought that. I didn't need it. It's guilt. It's just convenience. We've got to think as well, these companies, they're free, but it's because they're harvesting our data. They're selling it to corporations that don't have our best interests at heart. They're spying on us. They're now changing the laws so that they can switch on our cameras and our microphones and record what we're doing. And then if they like, pass them on to authorities. Like, this is such a massive betrayal. And yet the majority of people still go onto Facebook first thing every day when they wake up. We are doing this to ourselves in a lot of ways, and we've got to be more conscious.
Yeah, yeah. And it is easier said than done for a lot of people. So even if you just do it one thing at a time, you don't have to quit every single social media platform that you've ever signed up to and stop going on WhatsApp and stop all this stuff. Just tell yourself that you're just going to give yourself a limited amount of time on each social media if that's what you want to do. You don't have to just go cold turkey with all of it.
Be aware that if you do it that way, because I've tried to do that, and then I'll have like 5 days where I barely look at Facebook, and I'll maybe, I might buy the odd thing from Amazon, but then I'll suddenly go back really hardcore and I'll be pulled back into the addiction. So there's that long-term mindfulness of, if I'm going to make this decision not to be on there all the time, I've got to keep it going, and I've got to minimize it to the point where I'm not really using it anymore, rather than allowing myself to be sucked back in. Because like Nia said, that addiction is extremely powerful, and it has to be treated as an actual addiction. When you're an alcoholic and you're trying to quit drinking, you don't just say, well, I'm just going to have the occasional drink here and there, because you'll end up in a bar and you'll end up drunk off your ass, because that's addiction,
Yeah. Keeps us breaking the addiction from any app or any social media. It's like the first thing that I did, which made it super easy, is turn off all notifications. So there's no notifications. There's nothing to draw you back. There's nothing to get your attention. And step 2, which is not an easy one for most people to do, I uninstalled it from my phone.
Same. I haven't had it for like 4 years on my phone. I go through the browser.
So I don't even need, so I use a device for my work, which is my computer, my desktop computer and my laptop computer I use for my work. So I haven't got any social media on them either. I have social media on an old tablet that doesn't hold charge. I need to specifically put it on to check social media, and that makes it awkward. And I don't keep it to hand. I just put it in a different room, out of mind, out of sight. And actually that really helps to break the cycle, because you create a new pattern of behavior, which is radically different. And it makes it easier to break the addiction. But
I agree. There's another one you can do like that. So if you really just need your Facebook and you've got to go on there, then limit yourself to between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. So how I really started breaking the addiction before I deleted the app was I would leave my phone downstairs at night, because otherwise I would get into bed, and I'm a bit of an insomniac anyway, and I would find I'd be scrolling for 3 hours in bed. But then if you leave your phone downstairs, it's also better for your sleep cycle, because you've not got the Wi-Fi signals bombarding you. So we would turn our Wi-Fi off at night, and I would leave my phone downstairs from sort of 10 p.m. and I wouldn't look at it. I would make the mindful decision not to look at it the moment I got up. And even that, like, the hold it had of me was so powerfully broken just from that action alone.
Yeah.
But it goes back to that conversation of convenience as well, though, Jade. Like you were saying, it's convenient to shop on Amazon. It's convenient to just get our news from BBC, because it's just the first thing there. Like when you put that, when you move the phone away and when you stop, you create that interrupt, then it kind of gets you into being the observer. Then you catch your thoughts, then you're like, oh crap, I was just going to go on Facebook. So it's also very well intertwined, isn't it? Like this whole conversation we've been having tonight is just it all just melds beautifully into one.
It really does. I'm so blown away by it all.
Replace the practice with first thing looking at your phone, if you haven't got it to hand. Like, do a morning meditation where you set your intentions for the day, or whatever it is. It could be something super simple, like blessings to yourself, blessings to your family, blessings to the world, 5-10 minutes, rather than straight on your phone browsing.
Yeah, and you can set the intention for the night before as well. You go to bed in the evening and you can say to yourself, like, how is my day going to go tomorrow? What do I want my day to be like tomorrow? And you will, you know, they say the most powerful time of the day is just before you go to bed and that instant that you wake up. So you want to be setting those intentions around those times, and you will carry an intention that you set in the evening through into the morning, just naturally, because it's when your brain waves are starting to slow down into those different states, then it's much more powerful to have that.
You know, as well, is by kind of taking the time to do this and to break some of these patterns, we're also protecting ourselves against another threat. So it's not just that they want this point of focus on them all of the time, because this then keeps them in power, which is very convenient, you know, and it keeps these corporations very powerful, and it keeps them being able to limit or promote what we see and don't see. But there's also, if you're quite a forward-thinking person and you look a few years into the future, there's the transhumanist agenda. And I don't know, but there's sometimes I've gone on Facebook and I've just meant to pop on to maybe check Marketplace or to do something in particular, like maybe I've gone onto the allotment group and I want to see what updates are on there. And before I know it, I've been on there for 2 hours and I don't know what I've done or where that time's gone. And I feel like we're coming to this point where this transhuman agenda is going to become a real issue. And if we're not mindful about how we're consuming the internet, we won't even understand how we've been taken over by the transhumanism agenda. And that's another thing that's so important, because, you know, I know we can't visit people at the moment, but at times where I've like gone over to see relatives or friends, and normally a few years ago I could have had a great conversation with them, you go over there and they're just staring at their phone. And I've actually had conversations with people where we've been in a great conversation and then their phone's beeped and they've looked down and they've gone out of the conversation for 20 seconds, then they've come back and gone, what was I saying? And it's like, I already exited that situation 15 seconds ago. You checked out. And you didn't even realize you checked out. You thought you could just come back and pick up where you left off. And this frightens me. It really frightens me. I think the hold it has over us is really scary.
But then again, like Nia was saying, it is just all by design. And the longer they can keep you sucked into the social media, the more the subliminal messaging gets in, the more the conscious programming starts taking over. Like, there's no wonder that we get sucked into it. And then there's no wonder then that our viewpoints are then being challenged. You know, we start to question our you know, own judgment of things. It's all weirdly interconnected, like in a really awful way.
You notice too, it's leading to this thing with the news combined and the social media, that everybody's kind of parroting these same responses and they don't even realize that they're doing it. So if, for example, you say something like, you know, I find it a bit strange that the hospitals are at a lesser capacity than they were in 2019. Don't you think that's a little bit strange? They'll get angry and they'll say, well, you'd have a different opinion if one of your family were affected. And I've heard this 50 times in the last month. And it's like, well, you know what, if you, firstly, you don't know if one of my family members have been affected or not, you're just assuming and you're parroting this pre-programmed response. And secondly, if one of my family members are affected, then I think I'd be more inclined to know the facts and the figures. I wouldn't just get offended because people are trying to look into the details of what we're being told. So I think a big part of this is that when it comes to knowledge and understanding, there's things that people value, and one of the things that they truly value is their time. And if you say to somebody, look, just look into these figures or research this, they see it as this huge price tag is attached to that, because they've then got to use their time to look into something where they may or may not find the answers that they're seeking. But at the same time, we're disappearing into social media for 2 or 3 hours without even realizing what we're doing, and our time is just being sucked away where we're not achieving or accomplishing anything.
One of the very small good things that came about with one of the updates of Facebook, or one of the updates of the apps in general, was that it did start, there was an ability to see how long you were spending on the app. I think it kind of was forced upon them, because I don't think they would have chosen to do it if they weren't forced into it.
I think YouTube got that as well at one point.
Yeah, I think that allowed people to see just and woken a lot of people up to their particular, like their personal use of social media, just from having that option available to them. And when you see about the amount of time that you can get sucked into social media, and you think about where else you could have used that time in researching these particular things that you feel like you don't have time to research, or even like we were saying, by doing yoga or meditation,
yes,
then you could be doing 2 hours of meditation. Now think about how much that is good for you in comparison to getting sucked into social media. Which one would you rather?
absolutely, such a good point.
Yeah, so that is another very useful thing, limiting social media.
And the news as well. I think they're two heads of the same evil snake in a way, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And also, you know, there's a lot of people that like, which, you know, it's not my kind of thing, but a lot of people like these kind of programs that are full of violence and full of, like, you know, awful things that are happening. I kind of stay away from them. But I do believe that that has a negative impact on the rest of our day, even if we don't feel like it does. I think there's some sort of, you know, there's something underneath all of that as well. So if you can kind of limit the
Sarah, that's such a good point. Actually, you just reminded me. So they did a study on social media where they took one group of people and they showed them only kind of traumatic, difficult, depression-provoking posts, and then they took another group of people and they showed them happy, positive types of posts, and then they responded. They watched how those people responded on sort of like at their level of their brain waves and their emotions, and they can actually manipulate your entire experience throughout that day by what they display to you on social media. And I know for me, I had my phone app that would notify me. So even though I didn't have a Facebook app or anything like that, I had a news app. And it was bringing things up every day. And one day I just said to my partner, I've deleted my news app. And he said, why? And I said, because I'm not doing it anymore. And he said, what's wrong? It was that every day it was almost as if the algorithms of my phone knew that I was a mother. So they were bringing up stories into my notifications every day about children who had died or had been harmed or had been murdered. Every single day, this was cutting into my day with notifications of this child has been, you know, strangled and thrown into a furnace by his grandparents. I couldn't do it anymore. I know what the game is here and I'm not playing it. That app is gone.
It's to keep you in that fear state. So then when you're in that fear state, and this is one thing that's hugely important about this, that I can't stress how important this is enough, is that fear has such a detrimental effect on the immune system. So if we're talking about corona and all that shiz that's going on, you don't want to be signing up and consenting to ingesting all of this fear-based knowledge, and or it's not even knowledge, it's fear-based entertainment. Let's not forget that TV it's created for entertainment use, including the news media. There's nothing about the news that says that they have to be factual. There's nothing. There's no regulation on it at all, is there? It's for entertainment use only. That's what the television is there for. So they're trying to create this vision to keep you in this fear state, which keeps your vibration low, which interrupts your immune system. It puts your body in this fight or flight mode, and it stops your body being able to, you know, focus on what it needs to do in protecting yourself. So it will create the adrenals will rise, the cortisol levels will rise in your body, and your body can't do what it's supposed to do. So if the only thing that you stop using social media for and you stop watching the news for is to get your body back to protecting yourself, raising your immune system, and guarding yourself from the awful diseases and the viruses that we've got out there, then that's reason enough. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely right.
The conversation went that way because it comes to, we've come to the same point. It came up so many times tonight, is where we put our focus. That's where we give away our power. So being extremely careful and mindful and deliberate about where we give our focus is so important on so many levels, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely. Such a good point. And yeah, sort of going even further, I think there's this sense of hysteria now about everything that's going on. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of touch on as well, maybe I should have brought it up at the beginning, is the things that I think don't work in terms of dealing with what's going on now and getting to a better point. And there's three things personally that I identified. And so these are the three things that I think people automatically fall into when they realize that there's a problem. And I don't think personally that they work. And this is petitioning, protesting, and directly fighting. So I just want to break those down real quickly. So petitioning, you know, for example, I know Bill Gates has huge shares in change.org, and if they don't like a petition, they'll just pull it down. If it does get to Parliament, say it's one on the parliamentary website, if it does get to Parliament and they don't want to debate it, they can ignore it, or they can debate it in a way where they will debate it with their own slant on it, and that's the decision that they'll make. In terms of protests, I'm a flower child. I've been to many protests throughout my life, and I don't think that they're pointless by any means. I think protests are wonderful in the sense that they're great for making connections and creating awareness and informing people and creating a sense of momentum and unity, which is very, very powerful among humanity. And I think that's something that we need more of, is when, you know, especially now, is when large groups are able to come together and share a common goal and a common interest. And that's extremely important, but it's not going to solve this problem in its entirety. It's only going to maybe help us move towards that goal. It's not going to fix the issue. And then fighting,
it's only one part of it.
It's one part of it, absolutely. And then fighting, directly fighting. A lot of people are saying we've got to fight. That's exactly what they want us to do. This is an extension of that fear mentality. They want hysteria. They promote hysteria. They want us to get to that point where we want to fight. And do you know, there's sometimes where we'll be watching films or we'll be watching the news, and a really good example is the movie Pearl Harbor. So I've actually been to Pearl Harbor, and I think that movie is extremely devastating if you watch it and you're really sucked into that movie and you watch what took place. And because I've actually been to Pearl Harbor and I've felt the energy in that place. So when you're in Hawaii, it's the most beautiful place. It's like a dream. It's gorgeous. There's tropical flowers everywhere, and you know, it's beautiful. But when you go to Pearl Harbor, the energy changes. It's cold at Pearl Harbor.
Same with the Twin Towers.
And Auschwitz, I've heard as well, although I've never been to Auschwitz. It's cold there. As soon as I went there, being a very intuitive person, I felt tearful, even though when I went, I didn't fully understand what had taken place. And I watched that film, and it's really weird, but every time I watch something like that, like a war scene from, you know, it's been recreated from history or something like that, I always have the same vision that flashes into my mind. And it's a vision of Jacob Rothschild sitting in a leather chair with a big, creepy Grinch type smile across his face. Because this is what these types of people, or these types of beings, thrive on. They thrive on when we turn on each other, when we fight each other, when we try to fight them. And they're always better prepared in that sense than we are. We cannot win by physical violence. Yeah. This is an ideological war that has been waged on us, and it must be won accordingly. It must be won in the ideology. That's so important to understand here, I feel.
And it's interesting, isn't it, how, you know, you this is like, we keep going to the same topic of this is by design. The social media is putting us in a fear state. The news is putting us in a fear state. And then they're literally creating topics like, should you snitch on your neighbor? Or, you know, people aren't wearing masks here, or, you know, lockdown, we're going into lockdown again because people haven't been social distancing.
That person is your enemy. That person is your enemy. Everybody's your enemy except the person that's actually your enemy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the conversation about the wars. Do you know what I mean? There's no enemy with the wars. Why? We're in war for no reason. We're in war. It's
like Iran. All you're hearing is Iran in the news at the moment. Iran. Okay, to not get into the geopolitics behind that, Iran has not waged war on any single country or attacked any single country in hundreds of years. Why are we acting like Iran are so, you know, it's a separate subject completely, and I know things have gone down. But you know, it's a constant narrative, isn't it, of we always have this boogeyman that we need to be focusing on, rather than
Yeah.
focusing on the problems in our own
Yeah.
country or our own
And
community.
because our stress levels and our fear and our anxiety is so high because of everything we choose to take part in, the social media, the news, blah, blah, blah. You know, we're trying to vent our frustration, and the only people we feel like we can vent our frustration on is each other, because that's the way
Exactly.
they're setting it all up. It's just like this big chessboard, and they are the, you know, they're the peace movers.
Also, it's keeping us distracted from what really matters.
Exactly. Yeah.
Constant distractions.
Yeah.
And again, back to this learned helplessness of, well, I can't do anything about that. Actually, it's amazing what you can do something about. And again, it's all about the point of focus. What are you giving your attention to? What are you giving your support to? What are you giving your consent to? Even if it's not your direct consent, but that consent has been manipulated from you. It goes back to the point again where I have friends who are in the NHS who are, I'm terrified to decline medical intervention because I'm scared of losing my job. These people have lost their sense of personal power, of personal sovereignty. We have the Human Rights Act that protects us completely from things like that, where there can be absolutely no repercussions, or you can take serious legal criminal action against those people. And yet they're living in fear of being able to enact their own personal power and say, no, I don't want that.
Yeah. And I keep giving the advice to people is that, you know, if they are so sucked into what people should and shouldn't be doing, and, you know, they're looking and seeing what the media are telling them as the truth, if you spend just 1 week, it's all it takes in the beginning, it's just 1 week away from the news and you know, the programs that are telling you the narrative that they keep pushing, you will then start seeing the clarity come back and the discernment come back. Whereas you're so brainwashed all the time with everything that they're trying to tell us that we should believe in, that you start, and you're so scared that you start thinking, oh, I've just got to believe what they say. You don't see a different way. But if you just take the time to make the change and not watch the media just for 1 week, then you'll start
That's why, Sarah, people are bombarded constantly from all kinds of different channels. It's constant, to not give people an opportunity to shake it off.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's going
It is. Yes, that's such a good point, Nia. It is constant bombardment. It's not just, oh, you know, there's a week goes by where you're living harmoniously and then there's some bombshell dropped on us. It is constant. It is henpecking, hammering at our psyche.
And that's why there's no mention of nutrition. There's no mention of building the immune system online.
Vitamin
there's no
D.
other ways.
Yes.
Yeah. Because the moment we realize how powerful we really are, like they
game over. And then
Exactly.
it's game over. And all these people believe we've got to fight, we've got to protest, we've got to rally. All those things are great. But all we need to do is realize our personal power, realize that the pain, the suffering is an illusion. And if we can do that, this is what they're terrified of, because when we do that, they lose their hold over us and all the illusion will just fade away. And then we can move forward into the kind of world we want. And honestly, I believe that part of the reason that humans are in this position is because they're good, they're kind, they're empathetic, they're loving, they're sympathetic towards the suffering of others. So they're so easily manipulated. If you put on a story on the media of this person's suffering or this is happening and you've got to take action now to stop it, you've got to wear a mask, you've got to do your part, because people are good and caring, but maybe just a little bit gullible, they will fall so far into that and they'll take it upon themselves. If we could remove this manipulation and use that for creating a better world for everybody, that in itself would be so powerful beyond measure.
And what people don't understand at the moment is that the people that aren't wearing the masks, they're good people. They're really loving and caring and care about humanity, but they've just got a different perspective. They're on a different side of the coin. They can see things from a different lens. So everybody is in the same boat. Everybody wants humanity to become closer, to nurture each other, to care for each other. It's just we're on different sides of perspective.
That's an excellent point, Sarah, because the mask wearers and the not mask wearers, they're all caring people.
Of course.
Exactly. And that is so important for us to understand that we're being like you use the word, Jade, you use the word gullible. I would use a different word. I would use a word fooled. I would be brave.
Yeah.
People are just being manipulated and fooled.
Yeah.
And that is the truth. They're just being manipulated because of our the goodness in our nature. People are just being manipulated. And the moment we own our nature, own ourselves, and own our sovereignty, by that alone, it's going to tip the scales. And I would have to agree that there's going to be certain levels of where people may have to protest or make their voice heard, or there's different mediums to make it whatever it is that needs to happen. There's a place for everything, but it starts owning who we are and owning ourselves and owning our sovereignty.
And maybe trying not to be so reactive about the way that other people choose to manage the situation, and just think maybe that person has a point of view. Maybe if they're not wearing a mask, maybe they can't breathe in the mask. Maybe they've had a traumatic, abusive experience in their past where their face was covered. If they are wearing a mask, maybe it's because they have a family member who is immune compromised and they're so frightened of bringing a disease back to that person. Every person is just trying to do their best, and that's the beauty of humanity. They truly do care. They care about each other.
Everybody cares. That's who we are.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful way of putting it. I love it.
And this was one of the things where I was told when I was in my early 20s about one of the things that I was like such a positive hippie about, was because one of the things that I used to say to everybody is, what are the good intentions behind that action that they've done, right? So always thinking, is there good intentions behind this? Because it's very rare that people have bad intentions about anything that they do. And most of the time when we react about something and we do something in a reactive state and we explode over something, it's because we're hurting ourselves. You know, there's a lot of, we've got our own internal emotions going on that we need to sort out, and there's so much that's misinterpreted or misunderstood a lot of the time. So when we look at what other actions other people are doing and think, would they have good intentions behind that? What could they be going through that creates the good intentions? We're much more able to understand and have empathy for everybody.
What we talked about earlier is like being the observer allows us to be kinder because we're not reactive. We take it in and we have an opportunity to then respond. And because of the nature that we're just discussing, we're good people. When we pause, it gives us an opportunity to be kinder when we're just the observer, not the reactive. And we're kinder to ourselves, and we're able to extend that kindness to all others, really.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. I love that. I think another thing that we can maybe look at, and this is just something that I want to touch on just briefly, is if you're feeling frightened, and one thing that I've noticed is that within the truth movement and the people that are a bit more awake to what's maybe going on and some of the deception, is there's another kind of hysteria at that point where it's, oh, they're pushing this legislation and they're doing this and that, and now there's this going on, and detention centers and internment camps. And actually, if you look at the information that's out there, there is nothing solid whatsoever that this is any kind of possible reality in the near future. And if you understand the law, it would be very, very difficult for them to mandate any kind of medical intervention. It would be virtually impossible for them to do these kind of camps and everything like that. And what I would say is, for those people, I don't want anybody to think for any moment that I'm trying to underestimate some of the evil that is present here. And some days, I think this is the thing that's really got to me the most, is that some days that evil is so palpable, and it shocks me how evil and manipulative the agenda is sometimes. And I look at something and I'm just like, oh my God. And it hurts my soul to see that happening. So I'm not trying to underestimate anything, and I can't say what will happen in the future, but I think sometimes people jump on a piece of information and they get very frightened, and then they spread that information, and it's not actually always factual. And one thing that I would say to those people is, one thing that you can do to comfort and protect yourself is just start learning about the law, start learning about common law as well, start learning about the Human Rights Act, the Nuremberg Code, start learning about the protections that we actually have in place. And again, this ties in with our personal sovereignty and our personal consent, because we are sovereign beings, and this is not just about anything that can take place in a court. This is natural law. Nobody can do anything to you that you do not want done unless you're too frightened to say no. You know, this doesn't mean that you can say, well, I don't consent to being hit by a car, and you can walk into the middle of the road. You'll still be hit by that car. It doesn't work that way, because that's another natural law that, you know, you can't ignore speed and gravity and, you know, physics. If you walk in front of the car, you're going to get hit. But if you want to protect yourself, you need to learn about the natural law of consent and of personal sovereignty. Look into common law, look into current law, look into current legislation, read things properly. Don't just jump onto a particular type of wording, because I honestly suspect that they've even cottoned onto that some of the people who are a bit more wised up, they will read into these things now, and they'll word things in a particular way that will create hysteria and fear. And remember, that is the goal. And sometimes I've heard something and it's like, oh, they're doing this or they're doing that. And I've spoken to my partner, and I've been, you know, having a bit of a panic attack over it. And then because he's a very calm, logical, rational person, he sat there and read that thing, like, you know, painstakingly. And he said, hang on a minute, there's nothing in here that actually says that. There's a little bit of wording here that's a little bit precarious. And yes, maybe we need to keep an eye on that. And like I said, I have no doubt that these absolute demon rats in power would try anything if they get the chance. But, you know, some of the things that we fear just aren't happening, and we've got to be able to keep our feet on the ground.
I really like the fact that you brought in the law, common law, and the law and the maritime law that is operating. So
that's right, maritime law. You've hit the nail on the head there. If you understand maritime law, you understand how you don't have to be bound by maritime law.
Massive subject alert, massive.
Oh yes.
Even if you don't understand the difference, because I didn't. I admit, before all of this kind of like hit the fan, I had no idea what the difference was. It never crossed my mind. So I had to educate myself specifically, and I still can't say I've got a good handle of that. But anyway, so if you don't even know that there's a difference, or it doesn't matter. What we need to remember is, even if you look at the surface of what is going on at the moment, the Corona Act is an act. It's not law. And the reason why everybody in the mainstream media talks about guidelines, it's because that's exactly what it is. The legislation is a temporary legislation that is not a law. And in the current law, it's not even enforceable. And it's just scare tactics relying on fear, and people just conforming and consenting, you know, because they don't understand the difference. And once you dive into understanding it, actually, wait a minute, you know, there's actually all of these legislations on top of something else, and common law and this and yeah, that is a completely huge different conversation.
Yes.
But if you just scratch the surface, it's like the language they're using, it's guidelines, government guidelines.
Yeah.
It's not. And let's not forget, like, Parliament wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the fact that we choose it to be there. Like, they are, and the police force are there because we choose them to be there. They
servants to the public that have
exactly. These positions are supposed to be service positions where they are servicing and of service to the public. They've forgotten that. They're taking backdoor deals, bribes. They're going mad with power, and it's only able to happen while we are consenting to that happening. While, you know, I've had conversations in the past where it's like, oh, this particular party are doing this and it's disgusting. You know, they're victimizing disabled, or they're victimizing, oh, well, you know, politicians do these kind of things. As long as we have that mentality, it will lead to the unthinkable, where eventually we will be in an absolute cesspit where these people who've gone mad with power have dragged us to hell itself. We can't just let this be the norm and just brush it off as, oh, well, they'll do what they'll do.
Yeah, or that same mentality of, oh, it's just me, I can't change the world. That's not the mentality that we need. We need to become more aware of what's right for us, what's real law, what's not, what's true for us, how we're going to discern it, what are we going to decide is we want to accept and consent to, and then we move on from there. But one thing I do want to say, though, is that we need to just reiterate that not everybody who is in the police force or who is in the NHS or is in a member of parliament is bad or evil. And there are a lot of people that are serving the people in the correct way and really do want to help. Let's not forget, everybody is.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So it's not that we're against all of these people at all. It's just that we need to weed out the people that aren't serving us as humanity and figure out how we go about things from there.
Absolutely.
Totally agree.
And remember that we are the people in power because we vote them in, we pay their salaries. They're only there because of us. It's not the other way around. No, there's nothing that has authority, and I don't understand how this word got established, but there's no authority over us because we are the authority and they're the public servants. So it got mixed up there, and I think more people need to be aware of that, because that alone, even if you're not spiritual, even if you don't understand the detail of law, even if you don't understand anything else, just understanding that you are the authority, you are the important one, you're the one paying their salaries, they are the one that's serving you. Just that alone, it's enough.
Yeah.
You know,
they just have a job of service. That doesn't mean that they are suddenly born greater than you. And I don't care what bloodline they're from either. Just because somebody's from a wealthy bloodline or a powerful bloodline does not make that person more important or more authoritative, or, you know, that they're in a greater standing than the next person. We are all connected, and it again goes back to that interconnectedness. And I think these people who feel that they have this sort of weird right to dominate others and force their will onto other people, they've lost that sense of connection to their fellow man, and really they probably need help and some kind of rehabilitation.
And likely they're hurting from something personal in their lives. Like likely it's some sort of like external, you know, outburst of energy because they're in the fear state all the time, probably.
But again, like the media and the social media perpetuates this instant gratification, this materialism, this narcissistic mindset, which then leads to people like that then rising to power positions.
Yeah.
And they are in complete fear because you cannot possibly inflict so much fear, put so much effort and resources to do that for the 99% if you're not absolutely petrified.
Yes, exactly. This is what it is. I mean, this is now a dying, crumbling system. The terror and the fear and the panic that you now see of, we must sell you this narrative, you must believe what we're peddling. It obviously comes from fear, and it's fear of losing that position of being on this pedestal and standing before all of humankind and having this perceived sense of power. And really, they know that it's an illusion, and they're so scared of us figuring it out. And that's what this is all really about.
Exactly what it's all about. Scared of us figuring it out. Nail on the head.
Yeah. And you can feel it as well. You can feel the tidal wave of people, you know, rising up or starting to feel that something isn't quite right. So, you know, I think we started on the same sort of feeling, or the same subject, where we're talking about how people are waking up to this. So thank God that there is this tidal wave and this butterfly effect of just people waking up, and you know, we will get the new normal that we love and that we really hope for, that's going to be beneficial for everyone, where we're all living in abundance, we're all united, and we're the humanity or the humanitarians that we all really want to be, but we don't feel like we've got enough power to be. We realize that we do. It's going to be incredible.
We all have to believe in our personal power, but also realize that we're a piece of the puzzle. But with any piece missing, you can't complete the puzzle. So every person is truly, truly important. And there was just another point that I wanted to make as well, is that I touched on before about how this pressure and this control and this evil can feel very all pervasive some days, and it can be very frightening. And I've been in situations personally, and especially since I've begun to awaken, where I know some people kind of talk about being targeted when they start to awaken, and that's again a whole nother video. But one thing that I learned through my personal experience is that calm, logical, rational thinking, a calm, rational kind of persona and a way that you speak to people and approach people is actually the enemy of those that wish to control us. If you can be logical and you can be a thinker and you can process things and you can be non-reactive and you can be that kind of confident in yourself that you can take the time to actually process information and become very informed and very smart, then that is what they fear. They want hysterics. They want fighting in the street. They don't want informed, intelligent people. I sound like George Carlin with that statement, but he was right. He was an amazing person. He saw it coming before any of us. If you can be that calm, rational, critical thinker, then again, it's game over for them.
Yeah. And that's going to come in time as well. So like not to just think that you can just flip from, you know, reactive to responsive just like that. Again, it's going to come with time. So, you know, as you start to see, as you start to see that there's cracks showing in the stuff that you're watching and the stuff that you're listening to, and you're like, something isn't quite right, you know, it's just natural to still be reactive in that moment, and then to try and wake everybody else up like we were talking about before, but to give yourself grace and some patience as well, that eventually you'll get to the stage where you are more responsive than reactive, and that's the goal for everybody.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So is there anything you guys would like to say just to sort of end the conversation, just a note that you'd like to leave this on?
We actually touched on so many things that we know we can expand on. It would be wonderful to do that going forward, because it's so beautifully powerful to be able to share that and to expand on it and have those conversations. It's important to have those conversations started, because it's a process. It's not an instant fix, but as long as we get the ball rolling and start having those conversations, that's where the massive shift is going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I'd love to, you know, keep doing this, keep connecting, and just having the conversations, and you know, for everybody that's watching, just to say thank you really for, you know, taking the time to watch this and just have some open-mindedness, if that's a word, about everything that's going on, because there's so much that we have to deal with right now, and it's so difficult for everybody to try and work their way through this. So to take that time away from social media and to watch something like this, and then to hopefully take some takeaways that really, you know, have hit heart or hit deep in the soul, then it's just, that's what, you know, I know I can speak for you two as well, when, you know, it's what we are here to do. Like it feels right that this is what we're supposed to be doing. So I love it. So thank you for inviting me to the conversation as well.
Thank you for coming. I know we were all a little bit nervous because none of us are necessarily, you know, were big on being on the camera or anything like that. But I think we all just felt called to be here, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so.
And the most important thing is that we've connected, ironically, through social media.
Through Telegram.
Through a Telegram. But the most important thing, again, is we are all connected. And famous expression, well, God works in mysterious ways. And we are the divine spark. So we always have to remember.
Yeah, agreed.
I think what I'd like to say is just for people not to fall into the trap of losing their humanity. You know, your care for other people, your concern for the people. I know we're all here right now because we do truly care about other people. And it doesn't matter if they agree with us or if we're on the same page, we care about those people anyway. And to maybe just try and look a little bit beyond the differences that we might see, and maybe just try to look around and see, is there a bit of an agenda playing that's trying to divide us and to maybe make us turn on each other, and to just not fall for that, because that's not human nature. And I think if I could sum things up just in one line, I would quote my favorite band, which is Tool. And one of their lyrics says, "We are eternal, all this pain is an illusion." And I think that just hits the nail on the head.
I just literally got shivers up the back of my head when you said that. So true.
I do every time I listen to them. They're amazing.
So true.
And
Love
I
it.
say I'm so grateful to be part of this conversation, and it's absolutely incredible to be connected to you two gorgeous, gorgeous humans. And thank you to everyone that did choose to be part of this conversation, even as an audience. And let's just thrive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So well said. Let's just thrive, because I
Yeah.
think we've been so held down this past year, and it's time for us to thrive. It's time for us to rise up and remember who we are.
Yeah. Yeah, and keep the conversation going. Like let's continue to talk about this, you know, in the comment section or on social media when we want to be on there, because let's not forget, social media is not completely evil. There is so many connections, like you said, and good stuff that can come from social media. So to continue a conversation like this, I will allow myself to go on social media for that reason.
And let's face it as well, there's so many different types of social media coming up now, where the whole thing is we'll promise you privacy and we won't sell your data. So let's all just migrate over to these companies, and if they change their policy, we'll migrate to another one that's promising truth and sincerity and transparency, and not to harvest our information, because we deserve better than that. All of us.
Choice. We have a choice.
Yeah, always.
So we can exercise that choice and free will.
Exactly. I think that's another theme today, isn't it? The choice, the free will, the sovereignty, and the consent.
And we're one.
Thinking of you.